Good evening. I call to order the October 24th, 2023 regular board meeting of the Richland 2 Board of Trustees. Tonight's agenda, the agenda for tonight's meeting has been published and made available publicly. May I please have a motion regarding the approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to approve the agenda for the October 24th, 2023 regular board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Mrs. Nash to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, board members please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion passes. We'll move to item 3.1, executive session. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I'd like to make a motion, excuse me, to convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing receipt of legal advice, student appeals, student admission requests into the district adult ed program, contractual matters regarding the lease of property, breach of contracts, and employment recommendations and certified releases.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Ms. Agostini? Motion was made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Washington, is that missing a few things? Okay. No, we can vote. I will restate the motion so we can go ahead and vote on it. The motion was made to convene an executive session for the receipt of legal advice, for student appeals, for student admission requests into the district's adult education program, for a contractual matter regarding the lease of property, for breach of contract, and for employee recommendations and certified releases. And again, was there any discussion related to those items? And the motion was made by Ms. Washington, seconded by Ms. Agostini, and board members. There's no question. Let's go ahead and vote. All right, well, let's do a hand vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please raise your right hand. All right, the vote is unanimous. The motion passes. We will now convene in executive session.
I move that we are in executive session at 6:44 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Ms. Agostini, seconded by Mrs. Nash to end executive session. Board members, is there any discussion? Mrs. Agostini, is that correct on the screen?
It is.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We'll now move on to the inspirational moment and Pledge of Allegiance. I will ask Dr. Monica Scott to introduce tonight's guest.
Thank you, Mr. Trapp. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. I like to call him one of our superheroes. It's one of our bus drivers, and they get the opportunity to greet our students first thing in the morning and to make sure that they arrive to school safely, and also at the end of the day to make sure they arrive home safely. The greatest thing that I truly like, and actually I should say love about the bus drivers are, they get an opportunity to put a smile on students' faces before they actually arrive to us. They get the chance to give them motivation, encouraging words, and many times our bus drivers, not only are they superheroes, but these students look up to them as fathers, as uncles, and as someone who truly has their best interests at heart. So with that, I do want to introduce our motivational speaker, inspirational, motivational as well, speaker for today, and is Mr. Kenneth Corbin. Mr. Corbin grew up in Arthurtown community in Columbia, South Carolina. He graduated from Hopkins High School and then studied biology and business administration at Allen University. He is married to Vivian Benson Corbin. They have 3 lovely young adults, 7 grandkids, and 1 great-grandchild. Kenneth retired after 27 years from Carolina Eastman Company as an electronics systems technician. He is in his 8th year of employment with Richland School District 2 Transportation Department. And I think that is so key because many times we look at bus drivers and think they're just bus drivers. Let me just reassure you, many of our bus drivers are people who have retired from one business, but care about the interests of our future leaders. And they come back and they give back. So I hope, if we are not already doing this, that we appreciate them, congratulate them, and treat them with the honor that they deserve. I bring before you this evening Mr. Kenneth Corbin, who's also the bus driver of the month at Forest Lake Elementary School. Mr. Corbin.
Good evening. Thank you for the introduction. To Board Chairman Mr. Trapp and board members, to Superintendent Dr. Moore and staff members. As stated, I am Kenneth Corbin. I thank Dr. Scott for the invitation and allowing me this opportunity. Recently, I was named Bus Driver of the Month at the Richland Northeast Transportation Hub. I am grateful and humbled by such a distinction. Some of you might ask, how does one become Bus Driver of the Month? I'm glad you asked. The criteria considered is bus cleanliness, the buses are inspected, and a score is given. Bus driver's attendance, bus maintenance sheets, and no discipline issues during the month being considered. We also have 2 other programs, Bus Driver of the Quarter and Bus Driver of the Year. And those 2 programs carry a monetary award also. Now, I am elated to have my name listed among previous honorees. The American poet Robert Frost wrote a poem he titled The Road Not Taken. That poem reminds me of choices made and choices not made. I would remind my team to always start in a good place, and the choice made with faith will always be the right one. I made the right choice by seeking employment at Richland School District 2 Transportation. Now, I would be remiss if I would not elaborate about my coworkers. At the R2i2 Hub, there is a lot of teamwork, Management and drivers alike push and urge each other to always do our best. If we need an ear, a team member is willing to listen. I would venture to say in any given month, there are numerous drivers that could be named Driver of the Month. Personally, I see my role as coming to work as promised, do what is expected of me, and assisting the team in any area that I am capable of doing. I believe, and more importantly, management believes I meet those expectations. Therefore, after 84 months, the law of averages and maybe Murphy's Law caught up with me, and I became Bus Driver of the Month. Thank you, management. I also thank the team at Forest Lake Elementary for their posting. As a result, the distinction sort of went viral, at least in the circle that I run in. Because everywhere I went, people were congratulating me. I received several calls, texts, and emails. Again, I say thank you, Dr. Scott, in the district for this moment. Thank you. May we now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to my flag, the States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Are those bus drivers with you, Mr. Corbin? Okay, Mr. Anderson and Supervisor, we want to thank you guys too, and thank you for the support coming out tonight. We appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Corbin, and I would like to just add that I'm very glad we have highly professional drivers. When I was a junior in high school, they put me behind the wheel of a bus, and it is a great relief to see you guys. We will now move to item 5.1. Please have a motion regarding the approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Nash.
I move to approve the consent agenda for the October 24th, 2023 regular board meeting.
Is there a second? Was that Ms. McFadden? All right, motion has been made by Mrs. Nash, seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion? All right, Ms. Nash, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We do not have anyone signed up for public participation tonight, so we will move straight to...
Mr. Chair, could I have a point of
Oh,
privilege?
yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Thank you. So as the board is aware, I am a member of Leadership Columbia, the class of 2024, the best class ever. And I am blessed tonight to have some of my classmates here in the audience, as one of our activities in our passport as a part of education is to come and observe a school board meeting. So I would like my classmates to please stand up and be recognized. Class of 24, Leadership Columbia, stand up.
No, I need to do something.
Thank you for coming to our school board meeting and being a part of this process, as we are here tonight to ensure that we're running our district effectively and taking care of our students. So thank you guys for coming.
Mr. Chair, before we go on,
Yes, Dr. Scott.
Dr. Moore took it from me. I would like to have a point of privilege.
Yes, ma'am.
If you don't mind. But I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Earl Graham to do this for me. So if you can, you don't have your glasses? Oh, okay, then I guess I would do this. Actually, some of the international teachers reached out to me, and they wanted to come and just do something special for Miss Maria Owens. But she is not here. So I hate for them to just sit here and not have the opportunity. So they sent something to me. So in her absence, I would love to just read what was sent to me. And I think you guys brought a gift or something. Did you bring something? So would you like to read this, or? No? Okay. Well, I would do that in her absence. And if you guys can just come up to the podium, that would be great. But this was sent to me, and I think this is so awesome, because many times we have so many employees that do so many wonderful things, and they're our unspoken heroes, and we just don't hear a lot from them. But when I received this email, I said, I have to share this, especially because it came from a group of international teachers. And they sent me this email, and they said, Mrs. Maria Owens serves as the Director of Strategic Partnerships for District 2. She has performed in an exemplary manner to ensure the health and welfare of our international teachers are met. She has executed well beyond the call of duty outside of her initial duties and responsibilities. She has exceptional leadership, knowledge, and understanding of our international teachers program. She has compassion, empathy for all of us. She has given unselfishly of her time, resources, and personal contacts without hesitation. She has displayed the ability to get the job done regardless of the obstacles in her way. She has coordinated and spearheaded clothing drives, raised funds, negotiated hospital visits, surgeries, and utilized her personal expertise to make life easier for our international teachers. While landlords and rental agencies refuse to take on the responsibility of renting their homes to international teachers, Mrs. Owens personally negotiated with property managers and corporate CEOs to obtain housing for all of us. Lastly, she collaborated with the local churches and community groups to help welcome international teachers by organizing a Southern Food Festival for them. All these deeds were performed outside of the scope of her official duties and work hours. Ms. Owens is truly a true warrior with a cause. She is a vital asset to the Richland School District 2 community and all of the international teachers. We thank God that we have angels like Mrs. Maria Owens. So in her absence, we just want to say thank you guys for taking the moment to do that. And I know she'll be very excited to know that you did this and that you just chose to show up here and have something for her. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott.
If you guys want to leave that with someone with, okay, yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, we will now vote on items discussed in executive session. May I please have a motion regarding student appeals?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to deny appeals for student number 1 and student number 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini and seconded by Mrs. Nash. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Agostini, is that correct? We need to add to that, don't we?
It's student number 1 and student number 2.
Is that correct?
I motion it should be,
Yes.
I move, but yes, that's correct. For student number 1 and number 2, deny the appeal.
All right, well, board members, let's vote. All right, I think everyone needs to vote again. Okay. All right, the motion up there, oh, okay. Just to be on the safe side, did everyone vote the way they intended to vote? All right, the vote is 7 yes, 0 no, the motion carries. May I please get a motion regarding the student admissions request into the district adult education program?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Porter.
I move to approve the student admission request into the district's adult education program for students 1 through 4.
Is there a second? Second. Motion is made by Mrs. Porter, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Mrs. Porter?
That's correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion on the contractual matter regarding the lease of property?
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Scott.
I move that the board approve the Pinnacle Point lease agreement as discussed in executive session, that we authorize the superintendent to execute the written lease on the district's behalf, with the final lease agreement to be made available to the public once it has been completed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Dr. Scott and seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
Yes, I'm pleased that our operations department has been working diligently for the district facilities and looking for a location for our staff. However, we are the governing body of the district, and I do not agree with turning over contracts and leasing agreements to be signed by district administration. However, I am very appreciative that we have locations for what we need.
Thank you, Mrs. McFadden. Is there any other discussion? Dr. Scott, is that correct on the screen?
Yes, it is.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding the breach of contracts?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move that we direct the administration to make a formal complaint to the State Board of Education regarding the professional employee who breached their employment contract with Richland 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Washington, is that correct on the screen? Board members, please vote. The vote is 5 yes, 2 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employment recommendations and certified releases?
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Nash,
I move to accept the employment recommendations and certified releases.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Nash and seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Mrs. Nash?
That is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We will now move to unfinished business action requested, item 8.1. The agenda item in this section is a policy revision regarding policy JLCDB, epinephrine auto-injections and life-saving medications. May I please have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to approve policy revision, policy JLCDB, epinephrine, auto-injectors, life-saving medications.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
while I do like the policy and it's necessary, I do have concerns that we discussed about parents not being able to opt out. I do believe that there should be a way, because not every parent gives their child medication. They may be a medication-free or vaccination-free family, and I support the policy. However, I would like to look for language that says that parents can opt out. It's a parent's choice to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. McFadden. Is there any other discussion? Mrs. Agostini, is that correct on the screen?
It is.
All right, what I'm looking at in front of me, there's two letters different than that. Which is the, is it?
Oh, JL. CDB.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we need to change those. Yeah. All right, board members vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. New business, no action requested. The first agenda item in this section is a draft of the board schedule for 2024 for the 2024. Board members, the administration has provided us with a draft schedule for the 2024 based upon our traditional schedule of meeting on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. Additionally, this schedule includes dates for 3 workshops and a board retreat. Prior to the November meeting, please let me know if you have any conflicts with any of these dates, as it will be on the agenda for a vote at that time. Board members, are there any questions or comments?
Mr. Trapp,
Dr. Scott?
just one comment, but let me pull it up. I have my glasses on and I still can't. Thank you. I'm looking at the October 15th, 2024 board workshop at 5:30. I'm just curious if board members would like to change that date, because November 12th will be board elections, and there's a possibility there could be new board members. So to have a board workshop 2 weeks before that, well, actually 4 weeks, you might want to hold off until new board members, if possible, come on and they can be a part of this, because I think that's so great when new board members come on and you start right with the right foundations. So if it's the will of the board, I would love to see us maybe consider changing that date until after the November 12th election.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, I agree with you that I think that's a good idea. And this is, you know, like we said, this is a rough draft. And if we see things like that we'd like to move around, we need to do that before our next meeting, which, anybody have any other comments on that date?
I agree to moving it to, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I agree to moving it to November 12th.
Is there a date that we would like to move it to?
Mr. Chair, I was going to Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, Ms. Agassi.
I was just going to suggest that maybe you go relook at the calendar after the meeting
Okay.
adjourns and propose another date.
All right, I think that's the best thing. Any other questions or comments regarding the calendar? All right, next on the agenda is the capital improvement updates. Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chair, I would like to introduce Mr. Will Anderson, our Chief of Operations.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Is it on, Tony? Okay, thanks, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Moore, and good evening again to board members. This is our monthly capital improvement update. You all have a lot of information, documentation in your board packet, and I'm going to go over this quickly. Before I get started, I just want to thank you all, of course, for your support in this in the capital improvement project, in our bond work, but also, of course, our staff who work really hard. I go up here and talk a lot about this monthly, but our staff who is really doing the implementation for this, it's a major undertaking, and they work very hard at this. So John Clayton and his staff do a great job, and the people we work with are architects, engineers, contractors. So it's a big work, and they're all working for the better of our students. So I just want to thank them publicly before we get started. So just as a reminder to our general public, how many projects we've completed. We've had a lot of work done since we start with the bond passed in November 2018, and we started design work in the spring of 2019. Right now, we currently have those projects under construction with the dates that they'll be complete, and we'll talk more about these here shortly with some pictures. These are projects currently in design, with construction started to begin in summer and spring of 2024. The image you see there is of Rice Creek Elementary School. This is our schematic design. Right now, we're still working through what that may look like. You can see in the back of the top of the screen some expansion. What you also will see on the right is more drive and parking for those who go to the school, and the issues with the traffic on Hardscrabble Road. We're really putting a lot of focus on improving the traffic by getting more cars off of Hardscrabble Road. So that's something that we'll look forward to as we continue to work on this design. But this is schematic design right now for Rice Creek. E.L. Wright and CFK, you can see E.L. Wright's done. CFK is the image, the large image. Anticipated date of that being done is Thanksgiving, or end of November, 1st of December, and moving in. And CFK will be operating that facility in second semester in January. So we're super excited to get them in there. Then the remainder of the site will be complete throughout the spring and into the summer, and hopefully the image on the left, while it may not look exactly like that in the fall of 2024, but we hope to finally have all the parking and drives done by then. So super excited to get that project completed and continue to move on with that project. Condor Elementary School, we have our DHEC inspection for our kitchen in November, end of November. And so if that goes well, we'll be able to move into this new space. You can see the image on your top left is the interior of that image, the large image on your right. So a major transformation of the Condor campus there with that addition, which is a multi-purpose space for the arts, as well as our new cafeteria renovation in addition. So a really nice upfit for the Condor Arts Integrated Magnet School to have a state-of-the-art place to show off the talents of those students there. Our Performing Arts Center, which is right behind you all, over in the parking lot, is coming along great. You can see some of the images of the exterior. If you ride by, you can see it moving along. The image on your right is the large performance space. So very excited about that space, scheduled to be done in March of 2024. And we're getting to a point where it's getting a lot more safer to tour, so love to take our the board in there to see the space now that you can really get a feel for it, and we don't have so many things hanging above your head. So we'd love to set that up with y'all in the future. Killian Elementary School, you can see the addition there on your large image. You can see the other images of the finishes, and it's almost ready to be moved in. And furniture arrives next week, and so then we'll be transitioning into that new 6 classroom addition at Killian. Everyone will be out of portables, and so we're super excited to finish that. As you remember, in the summer, we finished the Media Center expansion, Media Center renovation this past summer. Pontiac Elementary School, you can see the slab being finished poured in the middle. That's the new addition, Media Center addition, Media Center addition and renovation. The images on your right are the Montessori class renovation, really expanding those Montessori classrooms to provide the correct space needs for those Montessori space classrooms. Blythewood Middle School, you can see in the top image is the new front parking and drives. The bottom image is the addition being put on, and the back is the new parking, the new drives. That has been a game changer for Blythewood Middle. When that opened up, we've got 95%, 99% of the traffic off of Longtown Road, and has really improved the traffic out there. So that's a big plus, big check, big win right now. But that's scheduled to be done. This is scheduled to be done in the fall of 2024. The addition at Blythewood Middle. Spring Valley High School, the image you see there is what's currently going on at Spring Valley. It's multiple phases of that going on, but this is the Bates addition and renovation. Bates houses the athletics, trainers, etc., and so this is the weight room addition. We'll be transitioning to the other side of the campus here ASAP. Once Dominion moves its gas line, then we'll be able to do the field house renovation, and then we'll be moving inside to the multi-purpose room renovation shortly. Other projects, we're still installation. It's like 99.9 on the camera conversion. It's just really training installation of all of our people. Access controls are up to 25% as we continue to roll that through. All buses have been purchased and all the safety and security projects are complete. These are all the other capital improvement projects we're working on that are outside of the bond, and we've been working through funding those and making sure that they continue to get complete. Just cost is settled, but inflation is slowed, but prices are 40% higher than they were two years ago. And so that's still a real issue. So we continue to work through ways to ensure that we can continue to get these things done. Our deliveries have gotten better. It's still random on what things we can't get on certain times. Our labor's okay, and then a few delays on our timeline, but overall we're still getting everything done in the timeline we committed to. And then you can just see where we are. The slide didn't work out right. I'm sorry about that, y'all. That did not come out right. That was not how it looked on my screen, but oh well. It's supposed to be in the. Good luck if you can read that. You're a pro. The biggest thing is there's no tax increase, and we are staying within our budget. I do want to point out, because you do see the red projects under construction, and you see completed projects that we were under budget. I think I just explained that a second ago. 2 years ago, we started these construction projects and the inflation has killed us. But you can see where we were at in the completed projects where we were under budget. So we're still working hard with Ms. Williams and her team to make sure we get all these projects where they need to be. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Board members, are there any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Nash.
I just had one question. I know that we had talked about previously about like the HVAC units and things that we were kind of still behind on as far as maintenance. Does this include that?
Ms. Nash, we identified in our bond project some of the HVAC units. So some of those are, for example, Lonnie B. Nelson is under design, and that includes HVAC. But there are other HVAC that's not included in that. And we've identified those in our capital improvement plan for 10 years that we have a lot of projects that at a very future board meeting we'll be sharing some scenarios and solutions with Ms. Williams on how we want to address funding those projects that were not in the bond. So Lonnie B. Nelson, as an example, is in the bond that will be addressed, but we just had an issue at Kelly Mill Middle School that was not in the bond, and we have to address that HVAC. So we're still working on the funding for that, but we have a good plan of what we need to address.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, or Mr. Chair?
Mrs. McFadden.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is really awesome because we just sat down and went through our facilities policies, and it is very much up to date and streamlined, so we appreciate this. And we actually had the 2015 one, Richland 2 bond referendum, to compare. So my question is that for the 10-year plan that you guys started to get the bond, are all those projects complete or almost complete?
As you can, well, if the screen was better, you could see it. But we're about, I guess, 3/4 of the way done through that. And so you guys, we just sold our last in June. Yes, sold our last bond in June that you guys approved. So we have about 3 years to spend that money, 3-ish. And so we'll be. We're actually, like I said, we're halfway through design in those projects. We'll be starting design soon in the next 6 months on the others, and so within the next 3 years, this phase of this bond will be completely closed out.
Okay. And so all the projects will be closed out as well. So we're going to get a 10-year improvement plan where we are, those maintenance items that Ms. Nash was talking about and any future projects.
Yes, so we have facility needs. I mean, we always have that. 6 million square feet of facility. We need to be spending at least 3 to 5% of our assessed value on those facilities yearly in maintenance. This bond referendum really helped us catch up, but there's so much deferred maintenance that we still have not caught up yet. And so what we're trying to switch to is be much more preventative in what we do. And so we have a plan that we need to now move forward with a long-term facility plan, which includes our growth, which includes our other needs. So we have a 10-year plan that shows our needs for maintenance, but it doesn't necessarily show right now our needs for growth and our needs for any programmatic changes that may occur. So we have anywhere from over the next 10 years an average of about $34 million what we'll need yearly to spend on routine maintenance and IT. And we're really trying to be more preventative so that we don't have to come back for a bond referendum to really focus on maintenance, because this bond referendum is roofs. It's a lot of safety and security, but it's roofs, it's HVAC, which are maintenance projects, which if we're being more preventative, which we're hopeful to be, then we won't have to come back with such a large bond referendum.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Washington.
All right, so I know we've talked before, we said it earlier today. When do we anticipate starting the facility study?
Any day, really. I mean, I say any day. We need to get with our procurement department and start working through that. What we were waiting on is our demography report, because I want the demography report that shows our plan, our growth, and all those needs to really help inform our facility study, because it needs to go hand in hand. So we need to make sure that our facility study takes into account all of the new facilities, renovation, additions we need for that growth. That should be done within the next couple months. They should have a final report that they're willing to come give to the board in public, and we're happy to have them come and do that. And then we'll use that to help inform. Doesn't mean we can't start the procurement process very soon to start that process to give it, so when the demography report's complete, they are using that to inform their decision. So we'll be working with the procurement team to make sure get that done. So pretty soon.
So in the demography report, is it going to give us information about specific zip codes within our district and how they anticipate growth? Okay.
It goes down to the, I don't mean to cut you off, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It really gets to the school. They're looking more in the school zone, even neighborhood areas. I mean, it gets very granular and detailed. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. And so my other question is, so I walked into a couple of schools and I noticed that some of them were maybe had like a classroom designed. I'm just going to use Joseph Kills for an example. Do we anticipate or do we plan in the future to redesign all the classrooms in that school? Because I see that there are 2 specific classrooms and they're super beautiful and really, really look like fun classrooms. So I just want to ask, is that something that we're anticipating for that entire school to do in the future? Or is that something that's currently included in the bond, and because kids are in school, a timing issue, what does that look like? I'm just asking.
No, that's a great question. And be completely transparency is funding. So we can't do every single classroom without the adequate funding for that. And so that's just going to be part of our facility study to at least give us the information so we know what it will cost, and then we have to make the decision, as a district, as a board together, what we can and cannot do. And so we were able to at least provide some spaces to Joseph Keels. But for example, furniture is an easy, I say easy, it's an easy solution. We don't have to do too much work. But the furniture costs have risen tremendously, just like everything else. And so, again, we would love to provide all of our spaces, especially our older spaces, to look like that. And that's our top priority as we work our way down. But we have been able to provide at least some spaces there at Keels with the media center renovation, the new space that they use. Everybody uses the media center. Everybody uses the new addition, and we hope to continue to do that. We have in our plan furniture every year to spend X amount on furniture and X amount on renovations, but then it just gets to a funding question, and so that's I hate to say it, but that is our biggest hurdle, is funding.
So that particular, and I'm just asking about that school, thinking about other schools as well. For that, like a site like that, where did the funding come from to renovate those 2 classrooms? Was it a part of the bond, or is this a part of the capital improvement funds from the district?
I'd have to see exactly what you're talking about. Most of that was bond. Is it possible that we did some other stuff outside of bond? I know we have grants that have come through Joseph Keels and other schools that they can use grant funding. in what we've typically done to make sure that all of our schools are accounted for, it's hard to do one whole school for furniture. So we'll say, we'll do first grade, and then every year we'll do more grades to move it to, or backwards, whatever it may be, because it's a lot to do that much at one time. That particular case, I'm not 100% sure. It may have been something we did in the past, or grant, or part of that. I'd have to double check.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking because we had like older schools like Bethel Hanbury, completely renovated. We have Lonnie B. Nelson, we have Joseph Kill. So I'm thinking about future-wise for some of our other schools, what does that look like? So I'm just want to put that out there.
Yep.
And then my last question is about this beautiful performing arts center. We approved in our last budget to have someone hired for that position. What are we looking at in terms of operational visions and goals for this building? I know we talk a lot about this particular facility being fully used and rented out. So I would love for, not today, I know you don't have that information, but just for the board to be provided with what's the operational vision for the Performing Arts Center, as well as what are the goals and what does it look like in terms of have we hired somebody to get into that position and not wait until the building's complete, but to really start digging in and thinking about what is that going to look like? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we, Dr. Moore and Dr. Franklin and I had a good conversation last week or 2 weeks ago, and so we're definitely, that's on our agenda to bring to y'all ASAP. So
Thank you so much.
Okay, is there any other questions?
Sorry, I just had just one. In the calculations that you guys did for going forward, I imagine because the cost of everything is rising, that's probably a liberal, like loose, calculation, that it's not like what we normally would see with the cost of everything rising.
Oh, yeah, every year I put, because Tommy used my inflation percentage. I think I put 10% or 5%, Tommy? I don't remember, but I only put 3 on it.
Oh, you might need to do 10. I'm just kidding. Am I?
I was trying to be conservative, but I didn't want to scare everybody with 10%, so. Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you all.
The next agenda item in this section is a graduation rate presentation. Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Coleman, our Executive Director of Accountability, Research, and Evaluation.
I'm so glad I didn't think I needed it. Thank you, sir. I'd call Greg Owens and I would say, how many seniors did you have? How many diplomas did you have? We divide it and we always had a 90-something% grad rate. And that was how many people across the nation were calculating grad rate in the 90s and the early 2000s. There came a time when Margaret Spellings became our Secretary of Education at the federal level that they started having a standardized grad rate. One thing you noticed when that happened is grad rate looks very different. And I want to just explain very briefly why that is. So once you enter high school, you're given something called a 9GR code. That essentially says, on this day, you entered high school as a 9th grader, or when you would have been a 9th grader. So that becomes your forever tattoo, right? So your 9GR cannot change once you were enrolled in high school. And from that time, from a federal definition, you have 4 and a little bit years to graduate. You have 4 full years plus summer school, and you have to graduate within that period to be considered an on-time graduate. There are really only 3 ways that you can get off of that graduation list for that high school. You have to have a formal records request, and that's not just me calling a school going, hey, my child's coming over here, can you send me this? Literally is a form that must be a records request from one high school to another. You either must have a letter of immigration stating that the student went back to their country of origin, or that the student is deceased. Those are the only 3 ways that you can get a student off of your grad rate, which is why we nationally saw a big change in graduation rates when we went to a really standardized formula. So, who's not a graduate? Unfortunately, GED students are counted as non-graduates. I'll save my soapbox for another time as to whether we should devalue that or not. I apparently didn't, but I meant to. But in our state, GEDs are not counted as graduates, though we know that for many kids, that's an incredibly valuable tool for them to get and enables them to enter the workforce, the military. So we don't agree with that as not being a successful outcome, but that is part of the formula. Dropouts are counted as non-graduates. Students who take more than 4 years and the summer are counted as non-graduates. So if you don't graduate with the cohort that you entered with, you're counted as a non-graduate. You can actually still graduate, and we do have some children who graduate in their 5th year, but for the calculation, they are counted as that. Students who are self-contained special education, I also want to be very careful about how we talk about this, because there are some students who their disabilities are so severe that they're not on a standardized diploma track. They're not taking Algebra 1, they're not taking English 2, they're not taking U.S. History, but they are in school with us, and they're joyous students of ours. If you've never visited any of those classrooms, I would highly recommend it. And they do get a certificate of attendance at the end of their time with us. But unfortunately, because they don't complete the 24 units of credit, they are counted as non-graduates. And the last one is a bullet that always raises some eyebrows, and we talk about those students we can't find. I know this is super uncomfortable. However, you've got to think when you're a high school, and we've got some pretty big high schools, you're tracking not just the kids, how it used to be when I would call Greg Owens at Spring Valley and say, how many kids did you have this year in 12th grade? You're tracking how many kids came in and out of your school over a 4-year span. So it's not just the number of kids that you all hand diplomas to at graduation at the end of the year. It's any kid who's been in and out of that building for a 4-year span. There are times where students stop coming to school, and despite the efforts of our amazing support services teams and our amazing administrators, we don't know where they went. COVID really hit us hard on that one as well. Lots of kids picked up and moved to where jobs were for their families, and so we do spend quite a bit of time doing PI work, trying to find kids when they stop coming to school. So here's the good news. The good news is we did see an increase in our graduation rate this year. Richland 2 has a graduation rate of 86.2%. We're well above the state average of 83.8. Much has been the theme with all of my other presentations. You'll hear it one last time. This is my last one for the year. We are experiencing rebound. We are not quite to recovery, but that is our goal. We're hitting rebound, but we're not quite to recovery, but we're getting there. So how do we actually monitor our grad rate? So there's two kind of components. The most important is the academic component. We need kids to get the 24 units of credit, right? And we know that we're monitoring that. We know that we need kids to be at school. We know chronic absenteeism is a barrier for us right now with this. Our schools actually are unbelievably amazing. Given the number of students that they're tracking at any time, having weekly or at a minimum monthly, I don't think anybody's only meeting monthly, but weekly check-in meetings. Where is this student? Where is that student? How is this student doing? What credits are they lacking? Where are they going? What are we doing? It's really quite a beautiful data science to watch the tracking and how they're trying to account for every single kid in the building and what they're doing to move them forward. We also meet with them as district leaders quarterly, just as another layer of check-in, but the most important and the hard work is happening in the buildings. The second part of graduation rate, I think we have gotten significantly better at, and that's documentation. As we talked about, tracking down and finding those kids, it's an art, it's a science. I will probably dedicate about an hour a week looking up every kid that we don't know where they're at in SUNS. SUNS is our district-wide student information system. It's not 100% accurate, but every once in a while, a school can say, do you know where Emma Coleman went? And I could say, I just looked her up at SUNS, and she's in, Tallulah High School in Chester County or whatever. So, we do try to find a lot of time to ensure that what is presented in the media to the public is accurate. Accurate meaning these are literally the kids that we graduated, and we track them down quite a bit. So probably much shorter and briefer than you're used to hearing from me, but that is the report on the graduation rate for 2023.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Board members, are there any questions or comments?
Mr. Trapp.
Dr. Scott.
Yeah. Dr. Coleman, thank you so much for that. And my question is, when we're talking about finding those kids, I know when you transfer to another school, you can't enroll unless you have that request. So why is it so difficult for us to find those kids?
So I didn't mean to snicker. That's the way it's supposed to work, Dr. Scott. What we're finding is that there are other districts who are enrolling students without having a records request, which you've been in high school. I don't even know how you would start to place a child if you don't know what classes. I don't know if parents are showing up with report cards. I don't know what's happening, but it's been very interesting that we are finding more and more kids who've enrolled without sending a records request to our high schools.
Well, for the record, we don't do that.
No, ma'am, we do not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
just an observation, and I'm looking for some type of comment. When we've been so focused on this chronic absenteeism,
Yeah.
what is the explanation for the increased graduation rate?
Yeah, so I think that we definitely have a lot of safety nets built in place with our kids, and that for the ones that we can get and that are here, we are successful with them, and that's why we continue to talk about that absenteeism and reducing that. Our teams have really hunkered down. When you look at our attendance interventionist, when you look at the opportunities that we give kids to make up work that they've missed, they have lots of safety nets in place. If I could wave my magic wand and fix the chronic absenteeism, that grad rate would go up pretty quickly. And when we look at individual schools' chronic absenteeism, there is definitely a correlation with those who have higher chronic absenteeism and lower grad rates.
And just one other question. You and I have talked about this, but I'd like for it to be public, because a couple of years ago, or a few years ago as a board member, at one point, the goal was to have 100% graduation rate. Would you comment on that?
I think, what's really interesting as educators, that I find interesting about educators, is it's never, no matter what goal we set, it's never going to be good enough for us because we serve children, right? But realistically, 100% goal, given the fact that we do have a self-contained population, is not feasible. And it's not because we don't believe in those kids. I want to make that very clear. But we have children whose disabilities prevent them from a standardized diploma, and we have great success with those babies, right? But 100% goal would not be something that any district who has any self-contained program could achieve.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Porter.
I wanted to ask about the non-graduate formula. Who determines that formula or that status of a non-graduate?
So that comes from the federal government about what counts and what does not count.
Okay.
Many, many, many years ago, there was a little more flexibility in diploma types. You could have a diploma that we gave to students who were on that special education self-contained track. We used to have a career diploma, which I thought was incredibly valuable, but that's when states were allowed to make their own decisions. The standardization, which was put in place so there could be state comparisons, was put into place by the federal government.
Okay. And then my next question, I'm not sure if it's something we could look at or not, but could the increase in graduation rate be from less expulsions? Just want to throw that out there.
Mr. Chair?
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Mrs. McFadden.
So I was curious, so everyone comes in with the 9GR, that's from our district. However, what if we have someone who comes in mid-sophomore year?
Great question.
From another state? How are we calculating their graduation rate for our district?
So our guidance counselors become mini PIs, right? So when a child comes in from New York or California, it is the job of the guidance director and the guidance counselors to say, okay, let me take this transcript. Now, not everybody has exactly the same classes from state to state, but there are some that are pretty similar. Algebra 1, English 1, those are similar. So the guidance counselor would take a look at those transcripts and say, okay, based on the credits this kid has taken, based on what they were in their previous state, we're going to give them the 9GR of this because this is the year that they would have started high school. Where it becomes a little more challenging is when we have students coming from other countries. And we are seeing an uptick in that because our education system doesn't align the same. And we are starting to see, and we've talked about this in our small groups, we're starting to see an influx of students coming from countries that have no formalized education process, and that makes it very challenging. But our amazing guidance counselors at our high schools make that determination of the 9GR placement. Good question.
All right, any other questions?
All right,
All right,
thank you.
Dr. Coleman. Next agenda item in this section is a human resource update. Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Dr. Franklin Foster, Senior Chief Human Resource Officer.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Good evening, Mr. Trapp and honorable board members. It is indeed a pleasure to be here tonight to talk to you about this important topic to our continued success as a school district. I think if you understand the human capital status that we're in now as a district and as a state and as a nation, you'll understand why we're seeing the numbers that we're seeing with our human capital initiatives in the district. My goal tonight is to share with you a quick human resources overview, just so you can kind of see the work that we do in human resources, because it is a lot more than just recruiting and rehiring teachers. It is a lot of work behind the scenes that I think is important just for you to kind of see the volume of work that we do on a daily basis or throughout the year. A year in review, some important data that's there that I'll share with you that will be enlightening to you about where we are as a district with our human capital initiatives. We'll be talking a lot more about teachers than the classified staff, but all staff is important to our continued success. And where we are now as a district, we'll look at some of the demographic information, we'll look at where we did some of our recruiting and hiring of teachers this year, and we'll look at where some of our teachers may have decided to join us from other school districts. And then the last thing that we'll talk about on my agenda will be planning for future success. Some things that, as I've been in this role for over 2 months now, looking at where we are as a district and thinking about how we plan ahead for future success. And then, of course, I'm sure we'll have a robust discussion after that on your questions about how we can continue to move forward. And I definitely look forward to that because we're not in this by ourselves. We need your support as well to make sure that we're hiring and retaining the most qualified staff for our students. So we'll get started. So Human Resources Department, we have a 28-member team in Human Resources right now. It is a centralized Human Resources Department, meaning that we perform all of our human resources responsibilities here at R2i2 on the first floor. And we're divided into the following areas. We have a talent acquisition, we have employment services, also includes our guest teacher services, benefits, business services, teacher quality, and employee relations. So I'm just going to share with you a brief overview of some of the things that they actually engage in. So talent acquisition, that is our division that supports our recruitment and retention of our highly qualified staff. They have worked really hard this year by hosting 24 recruitment events. Our Get on the Bus event is probably one of our most popular. That's where we bring in students from our local colleges and we give them an experience of visiting a high school, middle school, and an elementary school, and really getting to see what a day may look like if they decide to join us as a member of our team. And then, of course, we hosted 14 career fairs, participated in 14 career fairs hosted by local colleges and university. They attended in 5 events hosted by community partners, and then, of course, we recognized 7 of our first-year teachers through the Rookie Teacher of the Year, hosted by H&R Block. Sorry. Employment services. This is our division that plans and manages the district's employment services. So anytime there is a vacancy created by a vacancy from an employee leaving, a principal requesting a new hire based on some budgetary needs that they have, or just a position that's been approved by the board, it goes through this department. So last year they processed 3,166 recommendations. 788 of them were certified, 1,131 were classified. They did 912 for summer programs, and then they had 335 for our extended day. So they're not just doing things for our regular day, they're doing things throughout the whole entire year to support our students. They hosted 101 new hire orientations. Sometimes those orientations may range from having 2 new hires to having 30 new hires. And they do those on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then we of course have more throughout the time when we're in the major hiring season from May to June. They processed 474 certified separations, 331 classified recommendation separations, and then, of course, they generated for your approval and consideration 22 board reports based on our board schedule. Our guest teacher services, that supervises the employment services for our guest teachers. Last year, they onboarded 182 of new teachers, guest teachers, that transitioned to 47 transitioned to full-time employment. They had 36 guest teacher orientations. And this was an interesting fact for me, and I think you'll find it interesting as well, for requests that they received last year that needed a substitute for our areas that we qualify for sub, which would be all of our classroom teachers, all of our instructional assistant positions classify for a substitute, or eligible for a substitute. They processed 30,637 requests. That is a lot of requests, but as I started thinking about it, if we're averaging 160 employees out a day that are eligible for a substitute, multiply that by 180, that's 28,000. So that number is pretty much on par with what we were thinking. It was just very shocking to me when I saw that number out there at one time. So then, of course, they had 15,645 that they were able to fill. And then the unfortunate part is that we had 14,986 that we were not able to fill. So that's approximately about a 52% fill rate, meaning that on a given day, when I said we had 160 teachers out today, employees that are eligible for a substitute, we had 160 teachers out today, and one of those hard facts that you hate to share is that we were only able to fill about 50 of those positions today. So that meant that 80 classrooms were without a teacher designated for that room today, and which would mean that the principals had to utilize current staff to help cover those, which is part of the concern that I'm sure you're hearing from teachers about having to cover during their planning time. And then, of course, they received 11,340 for guest teachers due to vacancies. They're able to fill those a lot at a better rate because that's more of a consistent, so the principal may hire somebody for a maternity leave, for a vacancy that they have, and that person knows that I'm going to be in this classroom every day, and I accept that opportunity versus going to different classrooms. So they had 9,218 requests filled, and then 2,126 were unfilled. Benefits. Our benefit department manages the benefit offerings to all of our employees. They had 647 new employees enrolled in the state health plan. We had 395 employees to request medical leave. There could have been more than that, but because there may have been some that if they didn't request it, we require that they request it if they're out for 5 consecutive days, they are to request medical leave, or if they're out for 10 consecutive days. So that's something that we're still working on. And then they, of course, conducted open enrollment, which we're in the middle of open enrollment now. And they had 95% of our employees to participate in open enrollment. And then, of course, with the ACA, they have to distribute the 1095Cs, and they have to do 4,381 of those, which is a very detailed process. Business services, of course, everything that comes through employment services ends up coming through business services, ends up going to finance. So plans and manages the HR business services and serves as our contact with between HR and finance. Of course, they processed 3,166 recommendations. They processed 213 budget request forms. Budget request forms are the forms that we use if a principal wants to request an additional position based on them having Title I monies, and those have to come in so they can request those because it's not a budgeted position that we already have. And so they have to verify that they have the money and the need for the position. And then 475 new personnel action notices. Our personnel action notices was something we put in place last year to try to address notifying from HR to finance when a teacher's certification has been upgraded, or if there's been a change to an employee's status in another way, where principals may have moved a teacher from 1st grade to 5th grade. That requires a personnel action notice because of budgeting. Teacher quality provides support for the teacher evaluation process with teachers. We do all the certifications. We do all teacher renewal processes in district. And so they also do our student teaching placements. Last year we had 310 certification renewals. That is where the teachers have to actually provide the paperwork for them to show that they've had 120 hours of credit. They send it to their assistant principal for approval. Then they send it to us for our final review, and we upload it to the state system. We only had 77 student-teacher placements in our school, which is less than what we're accustomed to as a district. And then we had 97 employees seeking alternative certification. And we have to stay on and work with those educators a lot more because it's usually a 3-year process, and we want to make sure that they're working towards the completion of the certification program that they're in. And then my favorite that I spend a lot of time with is employee relations, which supports with performance management guidance. We work with principals on employment issues that they may have. If they have an employee who has attendance problems, we work with them on that. If they have someone who is not performing well, we work with them on that as well. It handles the grievances, work accommodations, and of course conducts internal investigations as needed. Last year, we had 107 employee relation cases, meaning that was someone had to actually, from our office, go out and was assigned as an investigator to investigate an incident that occurred with one of our employees. We had 20 work accommodations requests. That was where an employee requested, I need a work modification so that I can do my job, and we completed 20 of those. And we finalized 20 breaches of contract. Please note that that is not where all the cases that we had, because if you made a decision not to recommend them to the state, we stopped that case. But if you did recommend that we notify the state, then we continued. So we had 20 of those cases last year. And then just some of our certification stats that I think are important. Teachers that departed our district this year, we had 421. You'll see less than 1 year, we had 31 teachers. Greater than 10 years, meaning from anywhere from 10 years to 32 if they had that. We had 195, and then we had, of course, in the middle. Their post-employment plans of those that left our district, we had 69 that retired, and thankfully a lot of them returned back to us, but we did have 69 that made the decision to retire. And then we had to transfer to another district. We had 144 of those teachers to make that decision. And then plans not stated, they basically didn't state their post-employment plan, so it couldn't be tracked as to what they were going to do after they left us. They could have transferred to another district after that date that they left us. They could have sought employment with another employer, or they could have just left the teaching field altogether. Some of the information that we have as far as why they left the district, based on our separation form that we used, 34% said they transferred to another district. 18% was personal. And personal, I know that's a question that has come up, is what is actually personal? And personal can be defined as anything. People come and say, personal, if I'm leaving Richland 2 for a better opportunity at Blue Cross Blue Shield, they can say that that's a personal decision that I'm making. They can say I have a family issue that I'm dealing with, and that's personal. So we do have a comment section on our separation that gives them the opportunity to provide more detail. But when we look at our generic reason as to why they're leaving so that we can capitalize on the data, we utilize this information that's been provided to Sarah as well as the reasons why they're leaving our district. So you see that we had 34% to transfer to another district, and 18% was personal, 16% retired, and then of course we just had a small number of the others, but it still equates to a large number of people when you have 421 people who decided to not return to your district. I know one of the questions that we received also is, how do we improve our data collection for tracking purposes, and so that we can really know why teachers are leaving our district. So I spend a lot of time talking to teachers, and I get that conversation with them, but of course it's usually because they're making the decision to leave while they're under contract. Our exit survey does not, we don't do an exit interview unless an employee requests an exit interview. That's something that we can definitely look at, is increasing that and doing more random checks with that. My staff, we don't have enough to do 421, but definitely looking at how we can do more randoms. We currently have 2 methods for exit surveys right now. We have an internal one that we use in district that Jennifer has helped us with, Dr. Coleman has helped us with, and then we have one that we've assigned up with the State Department. So the State Department has one, so any teachers that leave our district, they're notified, and then they send them a form for them to complete. Our fill rate for that is not as high as what we would see for 421 teachers leaving. Last year, we only had 156. And just so you can kind of know why they're leaving, one of the main reasons is they want to seek another opportunity. So they want to look at districts that may be closer to their home. So they're definitely looking at it for personal reasons, closer to their home. But we do have some that are telling us that they're leaving because of financial, meaning that other districts are paying more, or they may be offering a sign-in bonus. And also we are looking at working conditions. Last year, we completed another survey through the State Department, working with them, called for South Carolina Teacher, which was looking at working conditions. Our working conditions data based on our district was basically working conditions, meaning the amount of paperwork that's required for teachers, the requirements for after-school work that they have to do. Special education talked heavily about the IEP process and having to spend that much time, because in our district, we have them serving as the teacher as well as the case manager. So that means if they have 30 students on their caseload, they're responsible for doing the IEPs and scheduling the meetings. So they talk about that being some of the issues. So we're looking closely at the working conditions and working with our district administration and principals on what exactly did our staff tell us about our working conditions, and how can we pivot and make some better decisions using that information from the state. So those are our current ways, but I do think one of the things that we can definitely look at doing in this upcoming year as people are leaving is doing more, some definitely random exit interviews, and definitely doing that as well. But I don't think that we should spend our time on exits. We really need to spend our time on, like now, how are you feeling, what are you doing, and how can we help, so that we're not losing teachers at the end. But that's something we can talk about as we get to our robust discussion at the end. Transferred to other districts, we had, like as I shared with you, we had 144 teachers that left the district. This is where they actually went to, and we had 16 to transfer to Richland 1. We had 9 to transfer to Lexington and Richland 5. We had 7 to go to Lexington 2, 20 to go to Lexington 1, 24 to Kershaw, 5 to Fairfield. And those just were selected because those are really our surrounding districts where we're seeing most of our staff make decisions to either join our district or leave our district. But then, of course, because of other reasons, we did have 63 that made the decision to either move to Greenville, Horry, Charleston, or various other counties as well. But it was more like our 1s and our 2s leaving. Percent of teachers returning, this is information based off our school report card, but I think it's important for you to know and see what our teachers are doing. So percent of teachers not returning to our districts. This is percent of teachers that are returning. So we have the districts that we selected. We have the number of teachers in that district based on their school report card. And then we have what the state has calculated as their percent of teachers returning for that current year. You can see that we're at 81.9% of our teachers returned for last year. You can see that our counterpart, Richland 1, had 77.5. Another one of our districts that we comparable to is Lexington Richland 5. They had 98.8%. We really need to start, we need to really contact them and say, hey, what are you doing to keep your staff? I mean, I think that's a robust conversation that we need to have. What are you doing to keep your staff, and trying to look at some of their things that we can implement here. And then you can see the other districts all were in the 80s, and then we had Lexington 2 at 79.1. You see the 3-year average. The 3-year averages are very close to their current averages, but then you see their average salaries as well. And please note their average salary is just based on the number of their teachers that they have. Their salaries are added together and divided by the number of teachers to come up with their average salary. And you'll see that we're at $55,436. And then some of our counterparts, Richland 1 is at $57,000. Lexington 5 is at $62,000. And then, of course, the others. So we do fall kind of low on that. We're right there where Kershaw and Richland 2 are, and they're a little bit higher than us just by a couple $100. So that's just important information, I think, to see how we're doing with our percent of teachers returning. Where we are now, this will be really a look at our demographics and talking about that, and then some other information as well, because I know that was one thing that you asked for demographic information. Before I move forward with that, I do want to answer another question that came in. It was talking about the 95% retention rate that was set from last year. Dr. Moore and I talked about it, and one thing that we can say, I was a member of the team here at that time, but I wasn't part of those discussions. We both agree that we really can't quantify why that was selected as the goal for 95% retention. We can say that we're looking at where we currently are and knowing all of the current data and looking at where we are, how we can progress and make a goal for this year, but definitely it won't be 95% because it has to be an obtainable goal. And we know that 95% in our current climate is probably, well, it's possible because we have a district that's doing it, so I don't want to say it's not possible, but we're going to have to put forth a lot of effort and collaboration on what we're going to do to get to a 95% retention rate, because it is a teacher's market right now. The supply is high, the demand is high, and the supply is low, but we can still capitalize on that because we have a model that says we had 98.8% of our teachers to stay with us last year. Where are we now? So we have 3,983 employees currently, and that is full-time employees that are working with us. Remember, we outsource a great deal of our other staff for our classified services. We have 2,483 which are classified. That's like 62% of our staff. Certified. Classified, we have 1,265. That is approximately 32%. And then the professional, I just want to kind of tell you what professional staff includes. That is an internal label that we use for staff. They're still certified or classified, but because of payroll issues and how they want to have certain payroll processors to process payroll, we do have a category that's called professional. And of course, when we pull that data, it comes out that way. And that's 6%. And that includes like social workers, nurses, a lot of our certified coordinators, directors, and managers are a large group of that position. Our average age of our staff is 45, and then 11 years of experience is typically what we have. We look at our certified staff years of experience. We have 841 that has 0 to 5 years of experience. You see that's our largest section of the pie, meaning that we have a large number of teachers that are young, that need a lot of support. I know we have a lot of instructional support for our staff, but that is one of those areas that if we want to maintain them, we need to continue to put resources into that group because that's where we can really start losing teachers. But we're losing teachers now at all levels when they're retiring out. But ones that we can truly hope and try to work with to save would be working with our 0 to 5 years. And then this is just our total staff by race and gender. And I do have this information provided in a board brief for you tomorrow that we'll have Thursday. That will be in a graph, Excel spreadsheet format versus the graphs as well. So if you look at our certified staff by race and female, you have a large majority of ours are basically we have black female, white female as our top two categories. They're right about 45%. One of each, and then of course we have less than that in our other areas, but we do have a fairly diverse staff with our certified staff for females. For male, we have a large number of pretty much about 60% of our certified teachers. Male would be white, and then the other high percentage would be our black males as well. And please note, these terms are what we use on our data sheet, and this is the information that's collected from the state. And please know that this is optional. An employee does not have to complete their information as far as their sex and their race if they choose not to on our forms. Then our total staff by race, you'll see that we have 1,151 white teachers, and then we have 1,018 black teachers, and then of course we have 136 that did not report, and then of course we have our Asian, which is mostly our international teachers, which I'll share some demographics on them in a little while, as well as our Hispanic teachers. Our classified staff, looks a lot different. Our classified staff, we have a larger majority of black teachers, which 541, and then 272 in the white category, and then we have 121 of them that did not report, and then you see our other areas there. That's for the females. Our male categories for classified staff, we have 170 black males that work with our students, and then 55 white males that work with our students, and 26 that chose not to report as well. And then our total classified staff by race would be 711. That's that number, and then 327 classified as themselves as white are our classified staff. And then we have 147 that did not report. And then the professional staff, as I shared with you, which can include certified and classified staff, you see those numbers there as well for the females. And then, of course, we have the male information there as well. And then the total professional staff, you'll see we have 116 that classify as white, and then we have 87 that classify as black, and then, of course, our other areas with 19 choosing not to report. And then this is looking at our new hires for this year. We did have a very busy hiring season, and a lot of that was contributed to, we had a lot of teachers that resigned at the end of the year, but then they made a decision to return. So we had a lot of people still making decisions about what they were going to do. They didn't want to sign a contract at the end of the year. They were wanting to explore their options. So we had a lot of transition in our hiring process this year. But we did hire 155 teachers from in-state graduate programs. Carolina probably was our most profitable one. We had 10 from out-of-state programs, 6 from online, and then our program for alternative certification. That is becoming a more popular one that we're seeing. There's more alternatives coming out there. There's some stronger alternatives coming out there. And so we had 10 for PACE, we had 7 for Teachers of Tomorrow, and then we had 5 from a college-based program like APEC. APEC is a partner that we have with Columbia College, and it's a very strong program. And we're extending that. We're looking at adding Carolina CAP, which is a program that's through the University of South Carolina. We had a long meeting with them today. We have a planning meeting with them tomorrow. They have a large cohort of teachers that are ready to come and looking for it next year, so we're really wanting to capitalize on that. So Dr. Moore and I did agree and had that conversation, so we did join Carolina CAP. We also have a partnership with Voorhees College, where they have a program for their teachers that are pursuing certification, and we have 2 of those placements at Kills Elementary this year that we're very excited to have a part of our staff this year, working with us under one of our mentor teachers. And then just looking at our other sources, I know this will be interesting information here. We had 11 district staff to transition to full-time teachers with us. We had 124 from other districts that joined us, 18 from out of state, 61 international teachers that joined us this year. And you heard the international teachers talk about Maria, and of course she is a very strong addition to our staff working with our international teachers. We have one of the strongest programs, and all 4 of our partners talk about how much we support our international teachers and how much of a collective and cohesive group we have with our 137 international teachers that we have in the district. And then we have 24 from contracted service providers. Contracted service provider, just so you would know, is that we did have to go out and look for contracted service providers that were able to come in and support us. So we have some that are on site working through a contractor, and we're paying the contractor for their services. And then we have a large number, a group of teachers that are working through a virtual provider, and so they're providing services to our students virtually. And then, of course, we have a facilitator in those classrooms that are monitoring and working closely with the teacher, but the teacher is off-site, and that is not through the district. That is through a vendor that we have purchased that we're utilizing those teachers through. So we did hire 238 through that method. So we did hire about 400 teachers this year, but if you look at where we were at, we're still behind because we went into the year with vacancies. We lost a large number of teachers. We hired, but then we still had a list of vacancies there as well. Where we are seeing most of our teachers that are transferred from other districts, Richland 1, we had 45 teachers from there. Of course, we had some teachers that decided to join theirs, but we had 45 to come here. We had 5 from Richland, Lexington 5. We had a few from Lexington 2, a few from Lexington 1. We had 16 from Kershaw, so we had pretty much a close even. I think they took 24 hours. We had gained 16 of theirs. And then, of course, 4 of ours came from Fairfield. This is our international teachers. We have 137 international teachers currently from 17 countries. And then, of course, we have 4 partners that we work with for our international teachers. And this is international teachers that are on a J1 visa. So a J1 visa is a 3-year visa with the opportunity to extend it for an additional 2 years. So those teachers can typically be with us for 5 years. As you can see from the 2 international teachers that came today, they are very supportive of our district. So we don't have a huge turnover rate with our teachers. They stay with us. We're about 95%. So like if you look at the 137 that we've had this year, we've lost 3 so far this year. And those 3 have been, 1, coming here, leaving their families and did not want to stay because they had children at home, they had a husband at home, so made the decision to leave. And then we had one to pass away, unfortunately, and we had another one that made a decision to go home just because of just family dynamics. So we don't lose our international teachers. We have a very high retention rate. We're around 95%. We were a little bit less last year because we did lose a large number of our teachers because one of our partners made the decision to end their partnership with us at the end of last year. So we have 7 of those that are still with us, but all of the other teachers that were with us, they made a decision to terminate their agreement with us. So we only have 7 of those remaining, and they're in their 5th year. So we'll have only 3 partners at the end of this year unless we seek another partner for international teacher sponsorships. And you'll see where most of our teachers are coming from. The Philippines is where the large majority, and then of course we have Kenya and Jamaica, and then we have other countries as well. We have 17 total countries that are represented. This is a breakdown of where our teachers are by their year in their program. So we had 52 in year 1. I know we hired 61 teachers, but we had 52 of those teachers that were in year 1. We had other teachers that were in other years that were coming from other districts to join us. So we had 52 that are in year 1, meaning that they have the opportunity to be with us for 5 years. And then we have 17 that are in year 5, and that's the end of the program. So they will have to, if we do the traditional method of the program, is to spend the 5 years here learning our culture and then going back and sharing it with the students in their country. So we have 17 of those. And then of course the year 4, that was the COVID year. So that was year 2021. We didn't have a need to bring international teachers. And of course the U.S. was not allowing us to bring international teachers at that time. So. And then just a demographic breakdown of our international teachers, and this is the graph that you'll have in your board report for board brief on Thursday that I'll share with you. International teachers, we have 48 males, we have 89 females, and then you see their demographic breakdown. 51 of those individuals are Asian, and then we have 43 that classify themselves as Black, 13 as Hispanic, and then 24 that did not report for our 137 staff members. Districts posting comparison. So we're utilizing the data from the 22-23 report card. That information is the number of teachers that each district has, and then of course we did a search on the number of vacancies that each district has. So we looked at their district website. We counted only the vacancies that qualify as working directly with students. So if it was an administrator, we didn't count those. Or if it was classified, we didn't count those. We were only looking at certified educators. So we have 71 current vacancies with our total teachers classroom teachers of 1,771. We have a percent filled of 96%. So that means that 96% of our classrooms are filled, but we still have 96% of our positions are filled, but we still have 71 that are not. Our counterpart, Richland 1, has 158 vacancies. They currently sit at a fill rate of 90%. And then, of course, another counterpart of ours is Richland Lexington 5, and they have 99% of their vacancies filled, with only having 19 vacancies right now. And then Lexington 1, of course, has 99% as well. And you'll see the other districts there. So we're working to try to increase that. It is a challenging process, but we are working and hosting events and trying to work with alternative certified people that may be interested once they meet the certification requirements. So I know a question came up about reference checks and what was the requirements of the district. So when I first got here, we were requiring 3 reference checks, and so we decreased that to 2. And so that is a reference check that we do ask that the principal or hiring supervisor contact one individual who knows about their performance. If it's a new teacher to the field, it can be a cooperating teacher or supervising teacher, or if it's someone that's leaving another district, we ask them to contact their current principal. Even if the principal has filled out an electronic survey, what we get is, and the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure that what's on the form that they complete is validated by that voice-to-voice. We typically hear conversations that may be different. So you may have a very stellar electronic reference, but then you get some questions or concerns that you're able to ask that person more intimately about that teacher and then their employee, and we're asking you to keep those references confidential. But we also want to make sure that it's timely too, because I could have filled out my application in December. I may not get an offer to June. A lot could have happened with my supervisor between between December and June. So it is kind of like a validation. The one thing that I think that we have looked at and we're talking about in HR is changing it up, because right now those forms mirror each other, and making the telephone reference look different. And so that the principal doesn't feel like they're asking the same questions that are already on the other form, and asking more targeted questions about things. So that's one thing that we're looking at as we are transitioning and getting prepared for our upcoming hiring season, which we never ended our hiring season, we're still in it, but our major hiring season that we know will be coming up soon. So that is our requirements for reference checks. So one has to be from a current supervisor, the other one can be from someone who may know their performance in another aspect. The current reference process that we have now is a 16-step process, and that process starts, this is a completed recommendation that you'll see, so after a rec is completed, it's been through those 16 steps, but I do want you to understand that it's not 16 physical steps that have to be taken. It is a process that's outlined as a workflow. So the workflow begins with the principal submitting a recommendation. So they have conducted their interviews, they've conducted their reference checks, and then they come back and they say, I want to make a recommendation for Franklin. So they recommend Franklin, it goes to HR, and then the yellow, so that's an action. So the blues are actions that have to be taken by someone in our department or in finance. The yellows are all notifications. So all of the yellow, step 2, step 7, step 2, step 5, 6, 7, all of those are just notifications to either the person who filled out the recommendation for the principal, the hiring supervisor, as well as the applicant. And then the green is actions that HR has to take. So when it gets to step 3, that means that it's been everything's been completed by our HR specialist. It comes to the approver. The approver approves it, and then it goes back to step 8, where they're starting the process for contacting the applicant and getting all of the paperwork started. So it's not really a true 16 steps. I mean, some of those steps are happening at the same time. So just keeping that in mind. But that is our current process, and that process is under review, as all of our processes are under review during this time, to make sure that they are efficient and compliant. Planning for success. So I've been in this role for 2 months. Of course, I've served in the Human Resources Department for the last 3.5 years. So I've had a lot of time to think about what we need to be doing to increase efficiency and compliance in our department. So planning for success has been my aspect that I talked to Dr. Moore about and our senior leadership a lot. And so one of the things, and this is a recommendation that was in our IG report, but it's also a recommendation that Dr. Moore and I feel is important for us to kind of get a baseline to where we are now and how we move forward. Because we know that any process that we put in place is not going to be a 12-month process. We're looking at 18 to 24 months to get everything done, even though I'm more ambitious than that, but I am trying to make sure that we are coming down on that. So selecting a consultant to conduct our comprehensive needs assessment of our HR practices and processes to assess compliance and efficiency. Our compliance means that we're following all state and federal laws. If we're not following state and federal laws, that means we're putting the district at greater liability for litigation with our employees. So we want to make sure that we're following that. I think that we're in good shape, but there are some things that I know need to be addressed and we need to work on to correct. So that is the process that we're working with procurement on now, and we're hoping that we're going to get a good group of people to submit their proposals for our consideration. As you recall, there was a task force convened by the governor called South Carolina Teacher Recruitment and Retention Task Force. They do have recommendations. It's about a 45-page recommendation. We're utilizing that as our guide to talk about what we need to be doing to make sure that we're trying to get to that 95, 98% as one of our counterparts with their teacher retention. Working with communications to create an employee value proposition and employer brand to recruit and retain talent. What that means is if we're looking at our employee value proposition, that means what do we have as a district? Every employee is looking for what does this district have that will attract me to their district. We have not been advertising or sharing our positive things that we have to recruit people to our district. So if you're thinking about like Starbucks recruits their employees by saying, expect more than coffee. And it outlines what you're going to get as an employee if you come here. Nike says, make memories, make moments is theirs, make moments. So they're talking about make moments through their value proposition, employee proposition. So we want to make sure that we are laying out a foundation for here's what you will get if you come and work for Richland 2. And we don't think that that's been something that we've really articulated to our new recruits. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at that not just for new people, but also for our current people. What do you get by being an employee here? And then our employer brand. Employer brand communicates, why should I work for here? And you heard our bus driver talk today about why he wanted to be here. You've heard Dr. Moore share some very enlightening stories about some of our teachers and talking about why they want to be here. We need to get that out to others. Our employer brand communicates, why should I work here and why is Richland 2 is a good employer. This is why I should work here. And so we want to make sure we're utilizing those resources to capitalize on our marketing plan that we're working on. And I do appreciate communication working with us on that, because it is going to be a very intense process, because we're going to have to talk to employees about why do you work here and why do you stay here, and then how can we increase that employer brand. Conducting a comprehensive classification and compensation study to ensure we're competitive with our surrounding districts. I know that that's been a long process. We are in that process now, working heavily with finance, because this is a finance initiative as well, and working with our consultant that we have to make sure that we are competitive, and we are in that process, and we hope that we can bring something to you before we get to the budget process, so you can see what our consultant is saying as where we are and where we need to be as a district. So we'll have that information. But that is important to us, and that will help us with our employee value proposition. Implementing the U.S. Department of Defense education activity, recruit, retain, restructure. And that is a grant that we've received from the Department of Defense. It's a $1.5 million grant that we received over a 5-year, and it's going to be used to help us really look at trying to get some of our students that are interested in teaching, trying to get them to come back into teaching reinforcement. So it's not like it's going to be immediate, but we have to start somewhere. So we're going to be starting with 8th grade and working with those students to see if we can get them to join our programs that we have for teacher recruitment, like Teacher Cadet, as well as getting them to go to college. So that is a grant that we are excited to have. Working with finance on the implementation of our time and attendance system to further ensure compliance with FLSA. One thing Dr. Moore knows about me is I want to make sure that we are compliant as a district. I don't want anything to come back on our watch where HR has not been compliant or has not done what they needed to do. So we're definitely wanting to make sure we're consistent with all federal and state laws, and this is one where we know that we need to have further compliance there. And then exploring options to increase our guest teacher pool to ensure a higher daily fill rate. You know, in talking with other districts, they are having fill rates of 80, 90%. A good fill rate would be about 80% for a day. So if we had 100 teachers out, we only have 20 rooms that we have to fill and work with, principals have to fill and work with staff. So we're really wanting to look at what are they doing to improve? What are they doing to get to that point? And then providing consultation and training to all levels of leadership and management on HR issues and topics. I mean, if they can really focus in and handle things at their level and make sure they're compliant, then we can ensure that we are working to make sure we're following all of the federal and state laws. I only took 10 minutes just as... But I wanted to make sure that you had the information. So if you would like to end now, I can go back and sit down. But if you'd like to have our discussion, let's go. I'm ready.
Thank you, Dr. Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Trapp.
Board members, who would like to go first?
Mr. Trapp,
Dr. Scott.
we all have one question. No, I'm just kidding. Just 2 questions. I
Yes,
have
ma'am.
10, but only 2. It's late. The first question is, I remember back in the day where we had college reimbursement tuition for teachers that were working on a higher degree level. Do we still offer that to our teachers?
No, ma'am, we do not offer that, and we haven't offered it since I've been here. We can go back and look and see where that program stopped, but I don't know of any district that provides tuition reimbursement, but we can definitely look and see if other districts are providing it, and we can look and see exactly when it ended here, because I
would love us to go back to do that, because I remember taking a course and getting reimbursed for 3 hours here and there. And I don't know if Dr. Franklin and some of those folks remember, but anyone else in the room remembers? Maybe you guys didn't have to do that you were so smart and you just paid for it. Okay, so my second question is, let's see which one I want to use for my second question. Oh, have we considered maybe outsourcing our guest substitute teachers and comparing the costs?
Yes, ma'am. That is one of our options that we're looking at. We're looking at that as an option. I know Lexington 5 outsources their teachers, their guest teachers. Richland, Lexington 1 just started outsourcing theirs. So a lot of districts are moving that way, and so we are looking at a comparison to see if that would be beneficial. If we can get an increase in our fill rate, I mean, I think that will take a lot of pressure off our schools, and that's one thing that we need to do.
Mrs. Agostini.
Thank you, and I'm going to piggyback off of your question because mine was on guest teachers as well. How many do we need to get to, you were saying about an 80% fill rate?
Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at your temporary staff, you have to realize that they make a decision when they want to work. So they may not work. I have my aunt's a guest teacher in another school district, and she only works 3 days a week. So we have to make sure we have enough guest teachers employed to be able to take that in consideration. So right now we have around 260. We probably would need to double that. And when I first got here, we had that many, but of course we've been through COVID and then of course the employee shortage. So we're not there. And at that time, the fill rate was closer to 70%. So we would need about double what we have now to be able to make that happen.
Okay. One comment.
I do
go
want
ahead.
to add too, a lot of our subs, because we're off guest teachers, sorry, Dr. Moore. A lot of our guest teachers are serving in a temporary position that's full-time now because of ESSER funds, and those are the school-based floaters that we have. And so hoping when that assignment ends, either they will transition to a full-time position in one of our classified vacancies that we have, or they will transition to back to the substitute pool, guest teacher pool. I'm sorry, Dr. Moore.
Okay, and I have one comment and then one other question. Thank you for talking about an obtainable goal for the retention rate. I appreciate that. And then questions about the virtual learning. So if we've got, how many virtual learning or teachers do we have?
We have, I can give you the actual number, but we have approximately about 16, but I can give you the correct number when on a board update.
Okay, would that look as an opening?
No,
If
it
we've
would
got
not.
virtual, so that, we're considering that,
It's a field, yes.
A filled position.
We're paying for those services, so it is a filled position. That position is closed until the end of the year when we'll actually try to recruit a teacher for it.
okay, so we're not going to, for a class that has a virtual math teacher, we're not actively recruiting a in-person math teacher for that class?
We are not. That vacancy is closed right now because we have a teacher there, because the agreement that we signed, the agreement is for the year.
Okay.
It's not for just until you find somebody, it's for the year. So we contracted with them to say, we cannot find a certified in-person math teacher. We need a certified teacher through your agency, and so we're obligated to them for that year.
All right, thank you, Dr. Foster. You were very thorough.
You're welcome.
Ms. Nash?
Okay, so one I want to say, air high five. That was an incredible presentation. You actually answered a lot of the questions that I had. It had everything. I also like the fact that one of my biggest concerns in the past has been about like the branding that we do around wanting people to come here, and I was really happy and excited to see that. Also, I know that you talked about like what like some of the other districts that they have 99% of their positions filled, things like that. Are you guys? I know you said that you're looking at them. Are you collaborating with them? Or, I mean, I know you can't give out trade secrets and they may not give them to us as well, but how are you guys going about looking at that?
So we do have a close association that pulls us together, and we all talk about things that we're doing, but we are in a very competitive market right now, so they're not going to give us all their secrets. So our hope is that we can talk to them about, hey, what are you doing that we know? And we know one thing, and I think you guys know this if you looked at our salary schedules, because I want to just make sure that I share this. If you look at our salary schedule, we start off at 0 year, for our bachelor's in 0 years, we start out higher than any other district. But when we get any other sales on that salary schedule, we're less than them. And some of them are $3,000 to $5,000 less. So I think one of the things that Ms. Williams and I have talked about, it's really looking at where we are with the 45 years. Is that really helping us, or is it hurting us? Because it takes a lot to go from 0 to 45. So most districts you're looking at, they're going to about 30, 33, and that's helping them have a higher salary scale than ours. Plus, they're also including more in their local supplement as well.
Thank you.
Any other Mrs. Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Trapp. So I have a question about our experienced teachers who are right at that place of retirement. Their salaries cannot go any higher. Do we have plans to give them more money? Because what I hear a lot is they will leave and they will go to the other districts. They'll get the sign-in bonus and then they're out. They're done. So do we have plans to give those teachers more money so that we can keep them in our system longer?
So that's part of our salary review that we're doing now. And so when you're looking at where we are, again, with 45 years of experience, we still are not, our sales on our salary scale are not comparable to other districts. So you look at one of our salary scales steps, we're probably given about, in some cases, a 1%. If there's no adjustments from the state, like this year they asked us to do 2,500, which we did, and so they all got the 2,500. But if you're looking at where they are at, if we're just looking at normal, you might be $60,000 one year, and then the next year if you were getting a 2%, you'd be wanting to be at 61.2 because you want that percentage. But ours might be at 61. So they're not getting the full 2%. So that's one thing that we really have to have some conversation about is the 45-year salary scale serving us justice? Because if we get to 33, they still would get their cost of living,
Okay, and so I heard, so we're talking about money, but money is not always the The number one, I mean, it's not always a thing. You talked about paperwork, after-school duties, sped requirements. I've heard classroom management, even unencumbered time. What are we doing as a district to tackle this? How are we going to start having conversations or putting out a message that says to our teachers that we value you in every other area? We know that money is the thing that we need to focus on, but these other areas are reasons that you indicated that teachers are leaving. And so what conversations have you all started having to tackle this? Because at the end of the year, if we don't tackle this, then they're going to go to other districts. It's going to be a continuous cycle.
Right.
So what are we looking at? What kind of conversations are we having with leaders to tackle these issues?
So we started out, we're using the data from the South Carolina teacher, which basically shows that working conditions was one of our areas of concern for all of our employees. And so we have a task force at the district level that's working to outline those. And we went to a training, we have another training coming, and now we're getting ready to share that with principals to start looking at their individual data about that. But a lot of those things are not just going to be on the principal. Some of them have to be district level. And those conversations are happening.
Okay.
It's just getting ready. A lot of it's going to be financial too, because when you're thinking about special education, just to say for one, and I'm not, Ms. Davis, you and I have had this conversation a lot, but when we're looking at special education, the caseload that they're doing, I mean, they're doing a lot. And so I don't know how much we can control that or what other districts are doing to control that, but that's one that we have to look at, because anything that we put in place is going to be a financial impact to be able to provide them with additional support.
Okay.
So that's one thing that we know we're looking at. So there's a lot of things that we're talking about, and I know that we need to, we're in October, November now. We're getting ready to go into the recruiting season in December, so January. So we know that we've got to start that conversation, and I will have to, kind of defer back to our superintendent about how we're doing that. But we are having those conversations, but as far as a concrete plan, coming back and sharing it with you, that will be on when Dr. Moore.
And I do have one follow-up question to that. So will the task force do some kind of pulse check, like it's the end of the first 9 weeks? Are we gonna, do a little quick survey of our employees just to kind of see how everybody's feeling, get some feedback so that you know how to move forward with the teacher and employees' input versus everybody at this level giving the input of what we think they need? Is that something that you all are considering?
That is something that we have talked about, and that is under consideration, because we know that we need to be doing that now, because that's how they're feeling. And, in December, when we send out letters of intent is when we usually get this huge number saying that I'm not returning. So we know we need to start doing some pulse checks, and that is something we're in conversation with.
And I absolutely want to thank you for the presentation, and especially when you said that you know that you want to start doing these random conversations, because I think it's very powerful for us to not just rely on this data where people can just select personal, and personal could mean anything, but that you're going to do some random conversations. And my last question, because y'all know this is a passion of my area, for me, is I went to a conference and I heard a lot about a grow your own program, and you're right, it's not going to fix the problem right now. But is that what that $1.5 million grant is? Is it a grow your own for us to do like a grow your own program?
So it is a grow your own. It's starting with some of our students that are still in school, but we are getting ready to start really focus. APEC program, we have Carolina CAP now, and so we're really wanting instructional assistants who have degrees and really wanting to get them to transition to teachers and working with them on that. So that is going to be part of our goals for talent acquisition, is working on that.
Awesome. And to Ms. McFadden, there's some pieces of legislation that I think we need to consider, that we definitely need to champion, and that's the certification renewal. And charter schools are allowed to have up to 10% of their staff that are non-certified, and we need to push the same thing for our public schools as well.
Yes. Highly qualified, non-certified. So, yeah.
Mrs. Porter, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Trapp. So you mentioned SC Teacher and how it's not as effective as the survey that we send out from us, correct?
Not SC Teacher. So SC Teacher was this was our first year participating in the SC Teacher for working conditions. That's what that was. For the state, we have one that we do internally.
Okay.
That we manage, that Dr. Coleman manages for us, and we share that with the EDs, Dr. Suber and Ms. Footman, we share that information with them for them to disseminate to the principals as they see fit and need to discuss concerns with the schools. And then we utilize the one from the State Department, which has a good bit of information, but we don't really have a representative sample of all of our teachers. So if we had 421 teachers leaving, we only had 156 of those teachers to complete that. So it gives you that information, and when it gives you the information, it really talks about percentages. So like one of the questions may be, out of these 5, which one was your main consideration for leaving? And so they have to kind of rate those percentages, and that's what the information we get. Now, and if, Dr. Moore would be open, that's something that we can share with the board. Because
my question is that the same?
So
that's the one we often hear
Sarah
about.
is different.
Okay.
Sarah, that was something new to me. I know we provide Sarah with a lot of information because the information that you received tonight is from our supply and demand report that we have to submit to them. So when you shared with Dr. Moore about the one from Sarah, I didn't know Sarah had one that they used. But I guess the question would be is, where are we going to get the validity and reliability of our staff when we're looking at giving them 3 different types of surveys.
Right.
So we
I was
already
thinking
know
of
that
one.
our staff is filling out
Right.
theirs, and we have a higher percentage with them, but then we have a low percentage with the state, and then, if we decide to do Sarah, what would that percentage be? Because we want to make sure we're getting the best information.
Is the state one mandatory?
It's not.
Okay, so you could test out Sarah to see if it gives you better results than the?
We could definitely do that.
And also, for exit surveys, and in my profession, I know that some don't like to fill out the surveys, especially when you have the open answer questions where they can provide extra information. And some would do better if they had an opportunity to just speak freely with someone, or to have some sort of virtual meeting as an exit interview. It's not so much that you writing it and putting it in stone, but maybe someone can gather that feedback. I just would like to suggest that be an option.
And that is an option on our exit survey, that if they would prefer to have a in-person or virtual, and we can do that as well.
Okay. Let's see. Also, for your reference check requirements. So you have the 2 references may complete a survey or some.
Electronic reference.
Right, an electronic reference. And then they complete that in December, like you said.
May, yes.
Okay, and then there's months later when they get hired, and now you have to do a telephone reference check, and the number has changed or whatever it may be. That's mandatory. They have to keep looking for that reference, or can they switch to another person if that person is not found?
So what we ask principals to do is to make sure that if they are encountering those types of issues, they can reach out to us, and we have contacts at the other districts. We can say, hey, I'm trying to get a reference for a teacher at school A. Can you help me with that? So we do have that type of relationship with some of our districts. As what that having trouble reaching that reference, then let's go to the next reference that can give us that. It may not be their current supervisor, but they have to document on the form, made 3 attempts to reach the current supervisor, unsuccessful. And just like when we come across some employers that only want to give dates of employment, we tell them to document that on the form. If you've contacted the current employer and they say, I can only give you dates of employment, put that on there, and then that serves as you've done what you have been asked to do. But the reason why we really are doing reference checks is because we want to make sure that we're hiring the best individuals for our students, and we want to make sure that there's been no issues with attendance, working with their staff, working with other staff members, relationship with students and parents. So that's where I'm talking about really modifying or revising our current telephone reference check, so that I think principals will, one, they'll have a guide because they like guides, and then 2, they'll have a different guide than what they already have and than what they have now, because now it is basically an identical check.
Right. My concern is that time frame and it being hard to reach. If perhaps once it's submitted, that you could do a telephone check before it even gets to that point, which you'd be more likely to get someone to pick up the phone, and so that you don't have teachers who schools want to hire, and they're sitting and waiting and doing this whole chasing this phone number, and then they go to another district because they could start sooner. So that's my only concern with the reference
And that's something we
checks.
can definitely continue to look at and refine that practice.
Okay, thank you. Your
welcome.
presentation was very thorough. I appreciate it.
You gave me the talking points, so if you give me what you want, I'll give you what you...
Thank you so much, Dr. Foster, for that. It was really very important, being the caseload, especially with what you were saying about SPED caseloads, and also those teachers who are third grade teachers, 4th, 6th, and 8th, SC Pass and Ready teachers, and those EOC teachers who have a lot of pressure of making sure that their students are ready and prepared to pass those tests that go on the report for everyone to see, and the caseloads and the pressure that they're feeling. And I know I'm not trying to pick and choose which teachers are better or anything like that at all, but I'm saying I am addressing the concerns with those teachers on those particular levels that are still on the same salary scale based on their years as their counterparts. Every kindergarten teacher who is basically getting the same pay scale from SC Pass, SC Ready teacher. And I feel like that's kind of unbalanced because of the amount of other work that they have to do for that. And just because it is standard, it is required for those students to make a certain, I guess, level that reflects on those teachers. So the pressure that they're under for that. And again, teachers, it's not a slight, but I am recognizing those stress levels for those teachers. And so another concern is, do we have certified teachers in all of those types of classes that are truly certified for that level, as opposed to a PACE teacher? Not that there would be a difference. Are we preferring or making a preference for those?
Based on the state certifies, we employ. So they don't look at differences. So if it's an alternative certified teacher through PACE, Teachers of Tomorrow, or APEC, we don't look at any differences. We say, hey, we have a certified teacher in that classroom because they've met the requirements that the state has defined as a certified teacher. So when we're looking at that, we don't have that delineation as far as if they're PACE or not, but we do want to make sure that we have certified teachers based in the classrooms based on the criteria that the state has defined. We do have those that we're working with that are called teachers pursuing certification, and some of those are teachers that in some of our classrooms that are working towards that certification, and that's a very small number, but they're helping us in those areas as they're working to complete their testing requirements, because of course teachers have a lot. Of course, our state requires that they have to pass those tests before. This may be an option that you talk about at some of your legislative meetings too. Other states require teachers to have 3 years so we can employ them as teachers while they're working on their certification. But we don't have that option here in the state. They have to meet that certification before they can be hired as a full teacher and classified as that. So those are some options that I'd love to talk more about that you can advocate for us, because they've been conversations that we've had, they just haven't moved anywhere.
Thank you for that, because I know a lot of people who are coming from the work industry, from corporate, who are saying, like, I'm done with the rat race. I want to go work in the community, believe it or not. So their certification, if they got a degree in business or they got a degree in environment or what have you, they're now actually able to go and get that same certification without having to go back to school and get that clarification. The next interest that I have is, so a lot of schools, like if a teacher breaks their contract, they are sent to the State Board of Education for their license to be suspended. How are we handling that if someone had decided they'd have enough that year, and so we had signed and voted to send their license to the State Board of Education, or let's say another district did it, but they're saying, okay, I want to come back, and it's before that year is up. Say they left in December, and contracts are coming out in April, and they're saying, well, I want to go to another district, but my license has been suspended since December, and it's not going to be renewed until the following December because it's suspended for a year. When those people or those teachers come in and say that, well, I want to try Richland too, how are we saying your certification and your licensing has been suspended?
No, I don't think we're doing that. I mean, so if a teacher has made a decision for whatever reason that they need to not continue in their contract, and we move forward with the process that we have in place, and you as the board took the information and you made the decision to notify the state, and we followed that process, and the state suspends their teaching certificate. They have that, whatever amount of time that the state suspends it, they have to serve that time, and then they have to make a renewal. They have to request to be reinstated back into the teaching profession. So it's not automatic. They have to make that, they have to do the application to be reinstated. And then if they're reinstated, if they want to apply, we are going to look at them. We've actually hired some teachers that have, decided to breach their contract, and we've hired. I think that because a teacher breaches their contract does not make them a bad teacher if we can work with the teacher, but because of the situation that we're in now, if it's not a performance or if it's not misconduct, I think we give them a fair chance at employment as well. I would not say that we would turn away someone who breached their contract, because it's all you have to look at the circumstances that cause that.
So my question is, I guess, when someone's license has been suspended, are they able to go try and get a job someplace else, or do they have to sit
They
that
have to
out?
wait until their license is reinstated. So they have to make application. If they have a 12-month suspension, they have to serve that entire 12-month suspension and then ask for their license to be reinstated.
Okay, and is that like a lengthy process, like you have to fill out a form and make an explanation and things
No, it's
like
not a
that?
lengthy process, no. It's just
Okay.
basically them notifying the state that they want to be reinstated, paying the fee that they have to pay for reinstatement, and that's.
For that, I haven't voted for that for almost over a year and a half now, because when I found right now, are in a very precarious situation. The environment that we've addressed several times, are a very hostile work environment, especially if you're having to run out and, break up fights and things like that, or just the overall stress. And so when they're making the decision to leave a district, I am voting, for the most part, I'm voting, if you want to go, you got to go during this specific time. So all of those people that we are sending, and I even wrote a letter to the State Department and asked them to not, take their certification, because they may just need to be in a different place. And I think sometimes we need a little grace especially for the environment that we're in right now. And actually, I do believe that they are moving toward holding off on those certifications and denying them.
There is legislation that's proposed to change the process.
And at this time, with the drought that we are having, if someone needs a break for a little while, let's allow them to have it. That way that we can get these teachers out, because sometimes it's just a matter of a family emergency, someone that has to leave for whatever reason. So I'm going to continue to offer grace for a while. So I won't be voting for that. I'm sorry, but I'm just thinking about, we need the teachers to get here. So if they're not able to come, and every district in South Carolina is doing that when they leave, then no one's going to be able to hire someone. So thank you so much. That was a great presentation.
I do want to say, I think our process we've kind of shored up our process and made sure that we're giving everybody a chance to be able to be heard. It starts with me or the person in my role. It starts with that person, and then of course we encourage them, if there's a way that we can, based on policy, that we can say, hey, provide us with the documentation, we'll share it with the board, and if you make the decision to not notify the state, we end that process. But I do think we have to be consistent, because we have 1,771 teachers, so we don't want to just say that we're going to be allowing teachers to be released. We want to make sure that we follow a process so that we can evaluate it and work with the teachers, because some of it may be just working through and providing additional resources as well, if possible. But of course, our process does afford opportunities for us to try to work with them, for them to provide information that we provide to you for your consideration.
Dr. Moore, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I want to let the board know that we do have one of our Apex candidates here tonight with us. She is currently studying to be a teacher, and part of her requirement is she has to attend a school board meeting. She picked the long one, but that's okay. It's preparing her for being in the classroom. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate that. And we look forward to having you come work for us next year when you successfully complete your program. And then the second, I wanted to go back to the point around the alternatively certified teachers that Ms. McFadden brought up. Because research is telling us that we are going to have to pursue that route more vigorously. We are not graduating. Colleges of education are not graduating enough teachers. Therefore, we will have to find other sources. And as someone who is alternatively certified, when I did that program, I taught all day and went to school at night. My temporary certificate was for 3 years, so I agree with Dr. Foster, a 3-year period. I was successful in completing my certification within a year. But I want people to know I have a degree in the content that I taught. So it wasn't like I was someone coming in and not knowing anything about what I was teaching. I was very well qualified, in fact, more qualified, because I had a degree in the content. It was meeting the state requirements of what is the pedagogy of teaching students, making sure that I completed my general test that we had, the general knowledge test, as well as understanding my content. So I had to pass 3 different certification tests, as well as complete coursework to do that. So I would strongly encourage the board, as you're advocating with our legislators, that we do look at what other states are doing for alternative certification programs, because there are a lot of great people out there who have chosen, after completing one career, that they want to come in and serve children like I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I do have one concern, and I applied to substitute, I'm sorry, guest teach. It was substitute then, though, so okay. It's guest teach now, okay. But for what it's worth, I still refer to my married sister as Trap sometimes, so it's hard to change things, okay? Guest teachers. I applied just about 2 years ago, and it took 4 months from application date to approval, which I thought I almost gave up, but I'm glad I didn't. It was a really good experience, especially where I'm at right now. I'm glad I did it. But I did have someone Sunday come up to me, and this is a former employee of the district. They were here through the 2022-2023 school year, and they quit their position and decided to come back as a guest teacher. And they applied a little over 2 months ago, and they still aren't through the process. So, and I'm not sharing this to try to throw blame on anybody about anything, but my question would be, is this fairly common on the timeline? And if it is, what are we doing and what can we do to speed that up? Because I really think a lot of people get discouraged and give up.
Yes, sir, I do understand that concern. I would as well if I was applying for a position. So I do think one thing that we have to look at there is that area only has 2 people that are working in that area right now, and we have one that has been out on leave but they're back now, but been out. So I do think that's one thing that we have to look at. I think the process as well, because we do have a different process that they go through, and a lot of it has been just checks and balances and making sure that they are providing everything that's needed for that. And once you have that completed application, it's another reason for us moving forward with looking at other alternatives too, because that is not all that they do, because of course they're managing not just them, but they're also doing the payroll for all of those employees that we have, which is every 2 weeks. They're managing any discipline, any employee relation concerns that come. They manage those as well as making sure that they are trying to recruit too. So there is several things, but that's something we can look into as far as that. And if you provide that name to Dr. Moore, I'll definitely go back and look at their application and see where they are and follow back up with that individual. Okay. But that is something that we are looking at, that entire process, because we know that is a concern that employees, if they have to wait that long. But of course, we do want to make sure that they have everything that they need submitted as well too.
Okay, thanks. That's all I had. Did anybody else have anything else they wanted to?
Mr. Trapp. I know it's late. However, I want to avoid any floods of emails in some of the conversation that we had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. McFadden. But I was listening to you intently, and I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I believe you were saying something about teacher pay based on performance. And so I just want to put it out there to avoid lots of emails that that's something that is often frowned upon with considering our SPED teachers and the different requirements that they have in the smaller classrooms and smaller students and it not being fair. And then also the different grade levels that aren't testing grade levels, and then you have that not being fair. However, they have other challenges. And so that's just one of those buttons that can be a hot button. And
Well, we're going to push the hot button then, because
we want to recruit and retain.
We do
and
want
so
to.
that's something that our teachers are a bit, can you know, it's an issue. So I just didn't want that to not be heard, that there are voices that understand that. So it's nothing to be offensive to you.
So I do understand completely, and I am welcoming all emails. That's fine. I mean, seriously, because I do understand that. However, we have to understand that not every teacher is able to flow in certain capacities well, especially when we see the reason why these teachers are leaving. And I am interested in making sure that our teachers don't feel that overwhelming stress. We are always saying there's too much on the teachers, there's too much on them, and it's for every teacher. But there is more of a scope on those teachers who give out those tests and EOCs, because that is the information that is publicized on websites. There are some classrooms who do not have their students' grade posted on websites. But there are other teachers who do, and there is a pressure there. There is a spotlight there. When it came out, math teachers and science teachers are under the microscope right now. And that, when they go into their classrooms and they are trying to teach right now, and they're trying to catch up over 2 years, there is an extra stress there. I'm not saying that other teachers don't feel stress. It's no different than if you're in a hospital and an emergency person comes in. I'm just speaking because I work at a hospital. Emergency person comes in on the emergency floor. Right then and there, those people are under the spotlight. You've got to get it done. If you're working in where I work at right now, it's not as stressful as a lot of other areas. And we have got to pay attention to that, because if I'm in EOC, science and math right now, I'm feeling pressure. Because that is what we're saying that we want to tackle. And so we're going to have chiefs of staff going to your classroom. We're going to have a lot of different reports. We would need to make sure that we're meeting how many ever times a week and a month, this department and that department. So we're talking about adding things on to teachers' plate. These are some areas that we need to focus on, lifting some things and lifting that stress. Now, for those teachers who, and I don't want to categorize anyone, but I am saying that I want to make sure that all teachers feel less stress. And those are the ones that I said that are the SPED, the SE Pass, SE Ready, and those EOCs. I'm concerned. And so I'm going to put it out there. I mean, it might be a hot button, but we've got to push those hot buttons, and we've got to deal with that, or we're going to continue to have teachers leaving. Please, teachers, don't take offense if you're not in one of those classes. That's not what I mean at all. But talk to your counterparts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden. Thank you, Dr. Foster.
Thank you so much. I had 8 chairs, so I follow the voice, so 8 chairs.
And our final agenda item in this section is a presentation regarding employee bonuses. Dr. Moore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce Ms. Nancy Williams, our Senior Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Moore. At your request, I stand before you this evening to present a potential employee holiday or mid-year bonus proposal. But before we start talking about that proposal, I would like to talk about some district needs. Some of those have already come up in the conversations we've had tonight. One of those most pressing needs, as Dr. Franklin discussed, was being able to provide competitive salaries for both our certified and classified employees. As he said, a salary study is underway, and we're waiting on those results in order to determine the costs to implement the suggestions. At this point, we are anticipating that we will have to phase in the results of that salary study because of potentially the large adjustments that may need to be made to some salaries. As you guys kind of touched on already tonight, we have costs related to just the expanded needs for services for some of our student populations. We have more and more students in poverty, more students who are in need of special education services, more students with mental health challenges and things like that. So there will be a cost associated with these district needs, some of them that will be fairly significant investments of district resources. You've already touched on improving the working conditions of educators in the district, and there's certainly costs associated with that. We have additional safety needs. This will be the last full year that we have to spend ESSER funding as ESSER 3 funds expire on September 30th, 2024. We have several items funded with ESSER funds that we will need to do a needs assessment on to figure out whether we want to continue funding those services. When you think about things like the summer program through SOAR, attendance interventionists, I mean, there are many needs, and we'll just have to figure out how to implement them, scale down, or just kind of figure out how to make those things work. As Mr. Anderson touched on tonight, we have preventative maintenance needs, technology needs, and the list kind of goes on and on. We have needs. Many of the needs that we have will result in the need for recurring dollars in fiscal year 25 and beyond. So we look forward to beginning the conversation as we start the budget process in January of how to best fund these needs for the district. Okay, so many of the needs discussed on the previous slide, we're still trying to determine the actual cost. But as Mr. Anderson touched on tonight, we do have a 10-year plan for technology and preventative maintenance. So listed on the screen, I have the 24 costs and the fiscal year 25 costs. Again, just the first 2 years of that 10-year plan, because every year there is an inflationary factor and those costs escalate. We do not have the resources currently to meet these needs, okay? And so within the next couple months, we will come back to you to discuss these needs in more detail and then put together a plan for how we can fund some of these, possibly through an 8% issuance. Okay, so before we can really have a comprehensive discussion on how much funding we will have available to meet those needs that are resulting from just costs that aren't in our current year budget, we need to finalize the FY23 audit. That audit is underway. You have the timeline in front of you. The auditors came on site in June to perform preliminary audit work, and I was told that that was the first time that that has been done. We're continuing to provide information, and we plan to submit that audit to the State Department by the end of next month, okay, by November 30th. Again, once that is finalized, we will be able to start talking about the funding available in order to fund our non-recurring needs like bonuses. Okay, so we had a question related to bonuses in the FY24 budget. So there was a $2 million signing bonus included in the FY24 budget for both new certified and new classified employees. That was $3,000 for certified employees, $1,500 for classified employees. Aside from that $2 million for signing bonuses, there was no additional revenue to pay for other bonuses. Okay. We also had a question related to teacher salary in fiscal year 24. So in the FY24 budget, you passed a $2,500 increase for all teachers. And so in this current fiscal year, the General Assembly mandated that the starting salary for teachers all across the state, $2,500, and they increased the state minimum salary schedule by $2,500 in each cell. Because Richland 2 salary schedule was currently paying more than the state minimum, because we're currently about 4.5% above the state minimum, we were only required to give a $679 increase by law. However, to remain competitive with the starting salary, only the starting salary, because that's where we're competitive, the board approved a $2,500 salary increase to the district's teacher salary schedule at a total cost of $7.8 million to bring the starting salary to $44,321. Because the governor has said that by fiscal year 27, I believe, he would like to ensure that all teachers across the state anticipate in fiscal year 25 that we would again give a similar increase. Again, this would be outside of what we find out from the salary study. Okay, so let's transition to talk about the bonus proposal. If there is sufficient funding from the FY23 audit, after the FY23 audit. Okay, so if sufficient funding is available, we would propose a $500 mid-year bonus at a cost of $3.8 million to increase retention efforts. This proposal would be to provide that $500 increase for all employees on district payroll. So Scott's comments into consideration, it would include guest teachers, but the amount for the guest teachers would be adjusted based upon the actual day's work. $500 would be the net amount that employees could anticipate bringing home. Could anticipate bringing home. And while we understand that it is possible to be provided before the winter break, I just wanted to make you aware that our payroll folks will be working hard to process 2 payrolls, so the one for the December 15th check, a December 20th payroll, to provide that final paycheck of the year that we would normally get at the end of the month. So there would be some logistical concerns with running yet a 3rd payroll during that same time period. Okay, so in the last 3 fiscal years, the district has spent on average bonus that has been provided in April. So if the board decided to fund both a mid-year bonus and an incentive bonus, the cost would be approximately $10.3 million. In an effort to slightly lower that cost, we would propose a longevity bonus instead. Again, if there is sufficient funding available, the bonus would be designed to target retention, and the amounts would be based upon years of experience or years of service to Richland 2, at a price tag of $5.2 million. Again, the stated amounts would be the net amounts, that each employee receives. This longevity bonus, unlike the mid-year bonus, would exclude guest teachers, and it would also exclude another incentive program. Okay, so if sufficient funding is available, the total cost of both the mid-year and longevity bonus would be $9 million. And we could expect a teacher with 1 year, not just a teacher, someone with 1 year or more service to have a range between 1,000 to 2,500. Those with less than 1 year of experience would still receive the mid-year bonus and the sign-in bonus, which again would be $3,000 or $1,500. So as far as next steps, within the next 90 days, by the end of next month, we will complete and submit the financial audits, have a final determination of fund balance and the amount of funding that we could use for non-recurring needs, things like bonuses. We're going to continue the discussion plan, which may possibly include an 8% issuance, and then we're going to start the budget process for 25, continue the determination of needs and quantify the costs associated with those needs. So it is, in my professional, it's my professional recommendation that we wait until the audit is completed so that we don't get employees' hopes up about bonuses. We have so many needs, and many of them will require a recurring commitment. In the last 2 fiscal years, the state has provided roughly $300 million in recurring state funds to K-12 education, specifically to the state aid to classroom appropriation. I don't know if that level of funding will continue much longer. Beginning the conversations with you as we go forward and we start the budget process on how to make sure that we are able to fund the needs of the districts. Mr. Chair, I'm available if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Board members, are there any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Scott?
What's the anticipated date on the audit being completed? Do you have an idea of that?
We will have it completed and submitted to the state by November 30th, prior to the December 1st date. And we'll have we'll be able to share that fund balance amount in the board brief right after that is finalized.
Okay, how much do we have in our general fund balance now? And how much would it cost if we gave bonuses and we retrieved the money from there?
And at the end, we're going to go back to the end of fiscal year in process. Determining that final amount is still in process. It's
So
still
the
a work in process.
93 million?
Yes, at the end of fiscal year 22.
Right. So do you have an estimate of how much it would cost us if we gave bonuses in December?
If we gave the 500, it would be at a cost of $3.8 million. We want to, was that the question?
Yeah.
That, at a cost of
So we're talking about
$3.8 million.
3.8 million out of our 93 million? And I know that we normally try to have at least, 2 to 3 months?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I know this is a tough one, but being a former educator myself of 35 years, that's just something that I'm hard to bend on. But I understand, but I do understand that you're coming in new and trying to clean house, so I'll work with you on that. But please, if you can, I'm begging. But no, all jokes aside, I understand. And we know that if you can do it, you could possibly get it done. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Porter?
I was just wanting to weigh in on the 2 options that you presented. If it was possible, the longevity one, I'm thinking, would address the concerns about our retiring teachers and that percentage that leaves because they get a larger bonus. I wouldn't include those who had the signing bonus because it's longevity. You want them to stay. What else was it that I was going to say? Oh, separate from that, a question about the salary study. Did you have an estimated date in which it would be done?
Okay, so to address the first part, so the years listed on the longevity bonus, it doesn't include those with 0 years of experience because those are the ones who would get the signing bonus. We're thinking we'll have some information back from the consultant around January, early January. Again, we're working with them, but we're anticipating a January date.
Is there any other questions?
Mr. Trapp.
Yeah, Ms. Agostini.
Ms. Williams, thank you so much for your presentation, and I am with you on fiscal responsibility and waiting until the audit comes out before we move forward or make any commitment. My question or comment is on the longevity bonus. I do like it, but I'm more interested in sign your contract to come back next year and then you're eligible for it, versus giving them the money, because to me, while we're, saying thank you for your 29 years of service, and I really do mean this sincerely, we appreciate it, but in order for us to really retain the teachers, I think we need, just my opinion, to have them sign it and then they get it.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at the draft agenda for the November 14th meeting. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next board meeting will be November 14th, 2023. We will begin at 5:30 with our call to order, and then move to the approval of the agenda. Executive session, we will recess to executive session, then we'll look at student appeals, employment recommendations, and certified releases. And if no other additional actions are required by the board, we will resume public session at 6:30 p.m., followed by inspirational moment and our Pledge of Allegiance. Once the pledge is completed, we will have our consent agenda, which will include the approval of the consent agenda, approval of minutes from previous meetings, as well as classified employment releases and in-district transfers. We will then move to public participation, followed by voting on executive session items, which would include employment recommendations and certified releases, and as needed, new business, which is action requested. We will discuss the South Carolina School Board Association legislative resolutions, then move to new business, no action requested. We'll have a report on special education, pupil services update, quarterly, first quarter financial update. Once we've concluded that, we'll move to section 10, which is the agenda items for the next meeting. We'll review the draft agenda items for December 12th, 2023, which is when the next meeting will be. If needed, we will have a second public participation. If needed, we'll have a second executive session, as well as, if needed, we'll have voting on executive session items.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Board members, are there any revisions or additions you would like to see made to the November 14th, 2023 agenda or to a future agenda? All right, we will move on to our comments. We'll start with Dr. Scott.
I want to say thank you to Dr. Coleman, Dr. Foster, and Mrs. Williams. Thank you so much for your detailed presentations this evening. Really appreciated it. And also to Maria Owens, in her absence, congratulations on just getting an award that you didn't expect to get. You're just working from your heart. And so thank you so much for that. Also to all of the students need. And also want to just say thank you to all of you all. It's been a very long night, so thank you for your patience and your understanding and your support for being here. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Mrs. Agostini. I mean, Dr. Scott, I'm sorry.
More, we over.
I got
So, I do want to thank our superhero, Mr. Corbin, for coming to inspire us tonight. And just to echo what Dr. Scott said, I do thank the presenters tonight. And after listening to those who presented tonight, we talked about obtainable, appreciated that. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thank you all to all the presenters. I will say I spoke to someone at the fair who requested that we get rid of the fall break and have a full Thanksgiving break. And I looked on the calendar for next year, and Miss Renaya Jameson, you got your wish. It's a week out next year.
All right, Mrs. Washington.
I want to say congratulations to Mr. Corbin for being the Bus Driver of the Month, and a special thank you to all of our transportation employees for everything you do. I had an opportunity to visit CFA Lions, so I used my passport, and I went and I heard some amazing conversations. Students were talking about their learning. They were taking ownership of their learning. They were talking about goals and areas that they wanted to improve in. One of the students actually sat down and she had a conference with me about her student work and her assessments, and it was just it was just great just to hear students take that initiative and that ownership of their learning. So Dr. Hutchinson and your staff, thank you so much. You're doing a phenomenal job growing our students, and Richland 2 is blessed to have your leadership. To Kevin Albersi and your entire staff, thank you so much for preparing our students for purpose-driven futures. If you have not had a chance to go over to R2i2, I suggest you go over there as soon as possible because you will cry like I did. I heard stories of current student projects where they are designing things for other countries. They're coding, they're baking, and they are even redesigning toys for students with disabilities. Warm my heart. That is a hidden gem in this district and in this building, and I pray that more of our students get access. So that more students will be able to attend and be able to participate in those opportunities. Thank you so much to Mr. Jackson from Forest Lake, who participated in the student-led event this week organized by Mr. Hamilton Jacobs from the Richland County Recreation Center. This was an action-packed Sunday. There were students from Richland 2 and parents from Richland 2 who were sharing their needs for a thriving Richland 2 community, and I hope to be able to share some of those things with some of our board members as well as our superintendent. And I just want to say, there are inexpensive ways to improve working conditions. A simple thank you goes a long way to our teachers. I have a friend in California who left South Carolina and took her family there, and she talked about how teachers are literally knocking down doors to teach in this school because they make sure that teachers' mental health is protected and taken care of. Teachers have PD days where they actually go home and they do no professional development. I hope that in the future our calendar committee can bring a modified year sample where there are more breaks throughout the year because our brains need break, not just for our students but our teachers as well. So I hope that we're going to be very innovative, and I know budget is a concern because we're talking about all of these needs, but if we do some things within our district that's creative, we are a creative and innovative staff. If we do things that are creative to show our employees that we appreciate them, it goes a long way. And of course, attaching the money, they will thank us. So I'm right there with you, Dr. Scott. $500? Yes, sign up. Thank you all so much everybody for being here tonight. God bless and have a great evening.
Thank you, Ms. Washington. Mrs. Nash.
Okay, so unfortunately, guys, it's a later night than we anticipated. However, thank you to everybody that's watching online. Thank you all for being here. To our Apex student, thank you for being here tonight, and stick with it. We need you. Also to Mr. Corbin, I thought that was awesome. When you used one of my favorite books, which is our poems from Robert Frost, and I think that's amazing. One of the things I wanted to say is about Maria Owens, that is so well deserved and so much more. I have seen that woman work, and I just want to say, she's one of those people that they have this saying that says, no don't mean nothing to me. That is Maria Owens. She is a fierce negotiator, and so that is just well deserved. Our Safety and Security Committee had a meeting last night, and I just want to say thank you to all the staff that was here, and our parent representative, our student representatives. We are super excited for 2023-2024 school year. And then lastly, the board, maybe they're being modest tonight, but one of the things we had an opportunity to do this week is take some classes, and so that you guys know that we're out there working and trying to improve. So kudos to our board for going to legislative advocacy classes as well as classes on civility. So that's all I have for tonight. I know that Boo at 2 is happening this week, so make sure you're there. Unfortunately, I won't be there because my husband has his first tennis tournament. So we're going to the Ship. So I won't be there, but I'll be there in spirit. Not a ghostly one.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Mrs. Porter.
Yes, I wanted to thank Mr. Corbin as well for the inspirational moment. 20 years ago, when my parents forced me to get a job and get my first car, I had to say goodbye to my bus driver, and that was Mr. Jeter. I still remember him today. So bus drivers do impact our lives. So I remember Mr. Jeter's not so cheery welcome, but he always gave great advice. But I loved him so much. And also I wanted to say congrats to our volleyball teams that ended a great season. And also I thoroughly enjoyed our time, board colleagues at our regional meeting and civility conference. I enjoyed some of our conversations that we had. It was a good time. And also, to Ms. Washington's point with our high schoolers, the choice fair, I asked that question earlier, that's where you would sign up for those fabulous courses in R2i2, and that's coming up very soon, and you have to register. So I'm sure you'll find that link online, as that our district is promoting it fiercely. And I also wanted to say kudos to all those that participated in Walk for Life for breast cancer. I don't know if we met and I already said that or not, but I wanted to make sure I put that out there. I walked with the Morning Milers team, and it was pretty cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Porter. Dr. Moore.
As always, I love this time of our meeting because I get to highlight some of the great things happening in our district. But I first want to thank Dr. Scott for highlighting our bus drivers. A student's day begins when they get on the bus, and the impact that our drivers have on our students is tremendous because they set that student up for success for the day. So thank you for bringing Mr. Corbin and highlighting that. We do appreciate that. I want to give a special thank you to Richland Northeast High School because they hosted a fashion show this past weekend called the 50 Shades of Pink, of which I got to be one of the stars of the event as a breast cancer survivor myself. And so I wanted to thank them for their hard work and the showcase that they did with the students. Those students are just fabulous, and they put a lot of work into it, especially one of our own, Miss Emma Coleman, was one of the stars of the show. So thank you to R&E. Now, as always, I like to highlight some great things that are happening with our school students in our district. So you know that part of our responsibility as purpose-driven leaders and of our district is to ensure our students are future ready. How do we do that? We do that through our College and Career Readiness, also known as CCR, which is a state designation for all graduating seniors. Now, the objective of the CCR is that every student graduates high school having met at least one of the metrics. And those metrics include a SAT score of 1020, an ACT score of 20, an ASVAB of 31. And for most people, ASVAB is not just for military service. It is a career planning tool for students. It will give them an idea of what career fields are best suited for them, as well as serving in the military if they choose to do so. It also includes the AP exams and our WIN or Work Key score of silver, gold, or platinum. Dual credit falls into that, as well as CTE completers. So in the class of 2023, 1 Richland School District 2 senior met all. That means every one of those criterias, and that student has been named the 2023 College and Career Ready Student of the Year, and it is Spring Valley's Mackenzie L. Simmons. So I would love to see more students competing for that, but we want to congratulate Mackenzie on achieving this status. It is truly difficult. Mackenzie will be graduating and attending USC. We also had 6 Discovery students earn perfect scores for AP research. Yes, 6 students from Spring Valley's Discovery seniors. So Lillian, Shirhan, Jisoo, Shivani, Ava, and Marina have successfully completed and earned a perfect score on their AP research exam in 2023. These scores are based on a 4,000 to 5,000 word academic research paper. Wow. Yes, and an oral presentation and defense. These students not only received the top score of 5, but they were also among 357 students from around the world to earn every point possible on this challenging AP capstone course. So we want to congratulate those students, but also their AP research teacher, Mrs. Spanger. Spigler. Okay, Spigler, thank you, on a job well done. Speaking of R2i2, who also had a wonderful cookie competition this week that I got to participate in. The raspberry coconut ones were my favorite. R2i2 is a finalist for South Carolina's Innovation Award. So one of 3 finalists statewide. This is for our proficiency-based education model that we call our moonshot model. So we will find out if we've won in early November at their award ceremony, so stay tuned for that. Richland 2 School District is also a district of choice, as Ms. Porter mentioned. And it should be a parent's first choice because we are the best choice. So the choice fair has been moved up a few weeks earlier this year. So parents, please go to the district's website and register now to attend. And if you'd like to have some more information about the choice process, listen to our podcast because the podcast was all about the choice fair. So middle and high school is Wednesday, November the 2nd, and elementary is November 1st. Both are 5:30 to 7 p.m. here at R2i2. Also, the Richland 2 maintenance team had a fun morning raising money and awareness for the American Heart Association at the Hard Hats Field event. So if you're interested in seeing some great pictures, and by the way, Mr. Will Anderson is the chair for the fundraiser 3 years in a row. He's done a phenomenal job, and our maintenance team, they rocked it. And we're so proud of them. Our Richland 2 custodial associates celebrated Unity Day by wearing their orange shirts to spread the message to stand against bullying and to celebrate kindness. So you see that nice picture. I didn't have an orange shirt, but next year they told me they would take care of me because they're all about making sure that we have acceptance and inclusion. So thank you to them for wanting to come up and be a part of our school's efforts to combat bullying. And finally, congratulations to Mr. Valenti Gibson, Jackson Creek Elementary teacher and the 2021-2022 Richland 2 District Teacher of the Year. Mr. Gibson is the recipient of the Civil Rights, Civil Liberties Excellence in Teaching Award presented by the South Carolina Council for Social Studies. He received this award earlier this month, and we are just so proud of him for his efforts. So, Mr. Chair, on that note, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I would like to make one announcement. We have our IG Report Committee has completed the tasks they were given, and we have dissolved the committee. And I'd like to especially thank the committee members, my fellow board members, Mrs. Washington and Mrs. Porter, for the hard work they did in taking care of those needs of the committee. Very, very happy we were able to conduct all that, and we're done with it. And I've decided to do something a little unusual tonight, which is I'm so pleased to see that we really have good professional drivers now. And I just have to share a story from 1981 when I was a bus driver, just so you can appreciate how far we've come. I drove a high school route my junior year in high school. Now you can only imagine a 16-year-old with a bus full of high school. I don't know why we did that, but my route took me from Spring Valley down to Brickyard Road, and then eventually out to Blythewood. Well, one day, long story short, pull up there to Brickyard Road. This is a long time ago, so it was much narrower. And the bus pulls up to the railroad tracks, and of course, what do teenagers do? They take your foot off the brake at some point and stomp the gas. So I did that on the tracks. So of course, we all freak out. Well, we're standing out there, and somebody comes up and says, look, we need to get back on the bus. I said, we can't get on the bus, it's on the tracks. They said, well, we'll push it. So I get in the bus. It was an automatic. I had one of the few automatics, The adults did not like me because I had automatic and they had the manuals, but that was life. I put it in neutral. All the guys get at the back of the bus. They push it up the road off the tracks. I put it in park. They all get back on the bus. So in 1981, right down the street here, there was a bus being pushed by high school students. So I just, again, I really want to thank our bus drivers and all the staff. You know, and another thing, there was, you know, no, well, never mind. I should quit while I'm ahead.
So, Mr. Trapp, we would be saying to you today, you have an appointment with Dr. Foster on
Yes. Well, you know, the thing is, we did the best we could, and that's all we can ask of anybody anymore, as I'm sure everyone here is.
Yes.
Now, having
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Agostini, yes, ma'am.
I move to adjourn the October 24th, 2023 regular board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Agostini to adjourn the meeting, seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Let's do a hand vote. All in favor of adjournment, raise your right hand. It is unanimous. We are adjourned.